Welcome to Backpacker Radio, presented by The Trek. I am your co-host, Zach Badger Davis. Sitting to my right is...
Hi, I'm Juliana Chauncey, a.k.a. Chaunce.
And sitting to my 12 o'clock is...
Hi, it's Elise or Sauce.
Sauce. I heard you guys ran into... Well, I guess we'll save that part. You ran into somebody that we know.
Yeah.
Reminders. Got a few of them here. This first one is exciting. I think we alluded to it in a previous episode, but things are starting to clear up a bit. We are headed to the great state of New York. Chaunce, that's where you woo, because you love this state. It's your home state.
Yes, it is my home state. We are going to New York City, and we are going to be doing a meetup.
Yes. Yeah, we're doing an entire trip to New York.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be about a week and a half, but we're kicking it off at New York City. We are hosting a meetup. 95% will be happening on September 16th, so save the date. Very outside chance it happens the following day, but looking like the 16th as of right now, probably in Brooklyn. So if you guys are in the area, please, we would love to see your beautiful hiker faces. We'll have more details for you. As always, follow us on Instagram, all the socials, and subscribe to the Trek's newsletter. We'll obviously release all of the relevant details once those are set in stone. But very excited for this New York trip. And Sauce gets to join us on this one as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was going to say, I'll be there.
Yeah, and for the meetup, we probably will make an Eventbrite again, even though it's not like something we charge for. But if you are to RSVP on that, it just gives us an idea of who and how many will be there, and that's super helpful to us. So if you are planning on going and you don't mind taking an extra step to just like mark yourself as going on the Eventbrite link we set up, that helps us know numbers and come prepared, and it'll just make it more fun for everyone.
Hell yeah.
And they usually do email reminders too with Eventbrite, don't they?
They do.
So that's nice if you are thinking about it now, and you'll be able to remember by the time the 16th rolls around.
Totally. But lots more to come from this forthcoming New York trip. We are excited for it. Maybe get out on the Northville Placid Trail. Maybe head out to a Bills game.
Go Bills.
We'll see. Next note is next week is PCT Trail Days. If you're going to be in the area and you have an interesting story to share, hit us up. Although I think at this point our interview schedule's full or very close.
Really good interviews planned.
Yeah.
I'm amazed looking at the list. Not like shocked that we did it, but I'm really proud of the names that we have. I think we're gonna have some really good episodes.
Absolutely. So very excited for that, and as Chaunce said, there'll be some good shows to come from that trip. Lastly, but not leastly, is if you guys want to support the show and or you want some additional Backpacker Radio content, consider supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/backpackerradio. Today, we're going to be doing an additional Patreon episode, and we are going to dive into some subjects near and dear to your guys' heart. I know, obviously, you just returned from a hike. We're going to get into that, but we're going to cover some subjects ranging from monetizing content, dealing with online criticism, the workload behind managing all of the content. Also, I'm going to talk about my forthcoming hiking plans and how my original plan might be fucked by what happens every summer, wildfires. So I'm going to go through some of my contingencies, and maybe you guys can help me brainstorm the best route with my 8 days. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
No, that's on Patreon. We are very grateful to those who do support us on Patreon. It helps us keep the show running, and we are excited to give you extra content to make it worth your while. So if this is something that you like to listen to, we appreciate all the support.
Yes. And whether you're a Patreon supporter or not, if there's something in particular that you'd like to hear from us, let us know. We always want to make sure that the content is fun and relevant for you guys. Okay. Let's get to our interview
with none other than
you guys. So apparently I was primed that Rachel's bio was funny.
Yeah, read it. But do the normal intro. Say like our interview with none other than. Come on.
So we're joined by Chaunce and Sauce. Chaunce and Elise are accomplished backpackers who are both highly skilled in Instagram reel creation. Chaunce is well known in the backpacking world for procrastinating packing for backpacking trips until 11 p.m. the night before departure, and for her intense fear of grizzly bears. Can't wait to talk about that. Elise is known for inspiring the online world with trail running videos, as well as providing well-researched informational videos about all things long-distance hiking. Chaunce and Elise, thank you so much for joining us here on today's episode.
Oh, Rachel.
I love the contrast to the bio.
I know. I was like a roast of me, and
I was ready to be roasted.
So before we get to the day-by-day breakdown of your guys' hike, let's just do like the fast and dirty fun facts. The Teton Crest Trail. I don't think we've actually said those words yet. So you guys just got back from the Teton Crest Trail. What is that?
It's a roughly 40-mile hike through the Teton Range in Wyoming, mostly through Grand Teton National Park, but there are some sections that you can start outside the park and you can go through sections that aren't in the park. There are a few different termini, depending on where you want to start and finish, but mostly there's a pretty much universally agreed upon 40-mile-ish section that is the Teton Crest Trail. What am I missing?
So is this a loop hike?
It's a point-to-point, so you'd need to figure out a shuttle. I mean, you could potentially make loops out of it, but it would be difficult.
We did a car shuttle, so we dropped off the car at the end, and then we hitched back to the beginning. Literally, the very first car stopped for us. I think when you're in a national park, people kind of just like see you with a backpack and get what you're doing.
Yeah, I bet two ladies get picked up a little bit faster than the average
it was
hiker.
Instant.
It's interesting because I've always had trouble hitching in national parks, actually.
Really?
Yeah, because I think it's a lot of tourists who maybe as a through hiker it's harder because you look dirtier, whereas we were very fresh.
Yeah.
But like Yosemite was one of the longest hitches. Yellowstone took forever. A ranger ended up pulling over and picking us up, which they're not supposed to, but he was like, don't tell anybody you were here. I'm not saying his name, so I'm assuming they won't be able to figure that out. But yeah, I've always struggled in national parks, so I was honestly surprised. I was a little nervous.
Okay, maybe I'm just young and naive then.
Or you're just better at getting hitches, baby.
I don't know. We have it on video because, so here's another plug for Backpacker Radio's YouTube is we're going to be putting up our Teton Crest Trail video there as well as our channels, so you can watch it there. And I was taking a video saying we just dropped off the car, we're about to hitch, we're sticking out our thumb, let's hope something happens, and the car stops while I'm doing that video. I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy. Okay, good. So point to point, you mentioned that there's a few different terminuses. How does that work if it's a point to point? So
basically there's a few different, we went south to north, and there are a few different starting points if you do that. So technically, from my understanding, the trail itself starts at Phelps Pass, which is just like you're already in the backcountry. It's like you're literally on the top of the pass is where the actual trail starts. So to get to Phelps Pass, you can start from the Phelps Canyon trailhead. I think there's a few trails that actually go there, but if you have been keeping up with the big road wipeout that happened in Wyoming, that trailhead is literally like half a mile from where that road is closed. So we were a little bit worried about getting a hitch either to or from there because people would have to literally just be going to that trailhead. It's not like anyone's passing through in that area. So we opted to be a little safer and had a few other options. A lot of people will take the tram from Jackson Hole. There's an aerial tram that goes to the top of Rendezvous Mountain and makes your first day, cuts off a lot of elevation gain, obviously, because it kind of just drops you off on the top of the mountain. A lot of people do that. We can get into why we didn't do that because that was the original plan.
We wanted to.
Yeah. We started from Granite Canyon Trailhead, which sort of, if you look at a map of the Teton Crest Trail, it kind of looks like a bracket. You basically like hike into the backcountry to get on the crest, and then you hike back out. And so we took the Granite Canyon entrance. Should I drop who we ran into? Because he was going all the way to Teton Pass. You can go all the way to Teton Pass, which is like a road. It's like, I imagine it's probably similar to like Berthoud Pass. It looks like. So that's another option. Basically, you just need to get onto the Crest Trail somehow. Yeah. And there's several options for it. And then the end point is like around Lay Lake, Jenny Lake area.
So there's options for how you can exit as well. So the middle is pretty consistent, but to start it and to end it, you have some options for how to get in and out.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for the overview. Tell me about permits, because obviously you're in a national park. That's probably the most challenging preparation logistic.
So yeah, this trail has actually been on my list for a few years, but by the time I think about permits, it's always too late because they do Teton backcountry permits in January. So mark it on your calendars now. I believe this year, I believe they went live on like January 10th. So I am usually thinking of backcountry permits in like March for my trips. So I always was missing it until I finally got wise to that. That being said, it did seem like they do have walk-up permits available. So if you're a little flexible with your itinerary, or you have like an extra day to wait for like the right permits to open up, it seems like there were quite a few walk-up permits. We were very easily able to change our permits when we got there. I don't know if that's because we already had a permit. Maybe that made it easier, but it seemed like there were like the campsites were not crowded. I feel like our last night there was not a single other party at our entire campsite. So yes, there are permits that go on early, and once they go on, it's like other permits in Colorado where like they're gone the second that it opens, so you need to be like ready to book. But it seems like you could do walk-ups fairly easily. And then there are also some options where you can camp outside the park.
We can get into that when we do our recap.
Yeah.
I think that'll make more sense. But with the permits, it is interesting because when we did switch where we were camping, the guy swiveled the screen around and he was like, oh, so you want to camp here instead? And he was like, boop, boop, clicking around. And it looked like, from my understanding of what was on the screen, there were options for kind of everything available. But it's really hard when you're someone who doesn't live in the area, if you're taking time off from work and you're planning a trip around something, to kind of rely on that as a walk-up permit.
Yeah.
Like, it's nice to know it's there if you have to get a certain set of permits and it's maybe not the most ideal itinerary, but doable. When you go there, you can go to the station and you could say, hey, here's what my permits are for. Is there any way I could try to switch this night to this night, which is what we did, and we got a more optimal setup that way. And obviously we could have done the original itinerary. You'd want to make sure of that because there's a chance you could get stuck with it. But that's a good alternative to someone who's not willing to just like wing it and see what happens when they get there, versus not getting permits at all, I guess. One more tip would be, if you do find interest in a hike like this at a time like when this episode is airing and you think to yourself, okay, I gotta remember to do this in January, I like to set reminders on my phone. So I'll hold down like the Siri button and I'll say set reminder for January 3rd to look into Teton Crest Trail permits, and it'll just remind you when you tell it to. So that's a good way to kind of make sure you don't miss a permit opportunity when it's top of mind, if that top of mind date is not at the time that the permits are going up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always put it in my calendar the day before they're going to go live. Like, they go live tomorrow.
I schedule emails to myself because I schedule so many reminders that they kind of just get overloaded now. Also, new iOS features, you can schedule text messages. So you can text message yourself in the future.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Cool. Permits. So you said that to do the walk-up permit, you would have to do it the day after you got there, basically.
I think it depends on what they have available. And I don't remember their exact, and I remember reading, I think, you could do walk-ups, and if they have something to start that night, then you can, but you might have to be flexible to start the next day. I think that's true for most walk-up permit situations.
Did you guys start on a weekday or a weekend?
It was like a weekend. I think we got there, we started Thursday. So it was like a long weekend, basically.
Okay. I wonder if you were to get there on a Friday or Saturday, if it's more competitive to get a day off.
I don't know. It still, like our campsite on Saturday night, well, that was the one outside the park, but our campsite on Sunday night was completely empty. It seemed like all the ones we passed on, what was it, Friday?
It was,
I guess we only had 3.
What's the lake that I keep calling Surprise Lake that wasn't Surprise Lake? Sunset Lake. That one had a couple other people there.
Yeah, but that was not permitted.
Yeah. And none of the ones that were permitted, really, we had company for.
Which is, so I feel like, and it's the middle of July, so I don't know if maybe people are scared of grizzlies or we just had a weird weekend, but it seemed pretty not crowded, which was awesome. Yeah. There were certain trails that definitely had a lot of day hikers on them.
Yeah. You could tell when you were close to a road point in the park, because at a trail junction, you'd all of a sudden see like a bunch of people. Yeah. And it would just be people who were out on day hikes and maybe their turnaround point was super close.
I think those people were on pretty long day hikes, to be
Yeah.
honest. So like, I think we were still 6 miles from like a trailhead,
Yeah.
but it was just like a really popular loop.
Yeah.
Travel, obviously you guys drove from Denver. Did you look into the most convenient like airport if somebody wanted to come in from outside of driving distance?
I mean, if you got big bucks, the Jackson Hole Regional Airport would definitely be convenient, but I'm imagining those flights are expensive.
Yeah.
I think otherwise, I don't even know what a big Denver might even. That's probably not true. Whatever the biggest airport in Wyoming.
How many airports are in Wyoming? That's
Probably
a
not that
question. How
many.
many airports are in
Maybe
Wyoming?
like
I wonder if Rawlings maybe.
Rollins.
Does Rollins have an airport?
See, that would be like
Or Laramie, more likely.
I was gonna say Laramie, but that would still be a decent drive. But but if you're flying from like across the country, you might need to. I would say whatever the closest airport in Wyoming.
Yeah. Okay.
Would be. Yeah. Maybe Casper.
It says there's one in Casper, Cody, Gillette, Jackson, Laramie, Riverton, Rock Springs, Sheridan, Cheyenne. General aviation airports. Yeah, there's options, but they're just not very big for the
Cody-
ones that would be close.
Yeah, Cody could work. It looks like we definitely drove through Riverton.
Jackson looks like it has the most enplanements from this chart.
Yeah. Okay, so roughly speaking, it's a 40-ish mile hike.
Mhm.
How did you guys get an exact distance on your version?
I could do the math real quick. We did like 3 miles the first day, 16 the second day, 14 the third day, and then 6 miles out the last day,
That's
like 6.4. Yeah, I've got like
39.4.
39.7 is what
Yeah.
I...
So pretty close to 40.
Yeah. And what about elevation gain?
I think it was like 3,000 to 4,000 a day.
Okay.
In the itinerary
No, we
did.
were like hovering around 4,000 for the 15 mile and the 13 mile. Wasn't it like 4,200? Or maybe that was my straight line.
So, yeah. So it was interesting because Gaia said different things than my Garmin watch did.
Right.
So the first day, so like on either end, we hiked very small distances, and it was the big 2 days in the middle really that was the majority of the elevation gain, I'd say. Day 1 or day 2 technically, but the first big day, I think my watch said something around like 4,000. And then I believe day 2 was maybe a little bit less than that, like 3,700.
Yeah, we're relying on your watch being the more accurate of the two.
Whereas Gaia was saying like 4,500 the first day and then like 4,300 the second day or something.
For me, this was like when we did the other TCT, the Trans-Catalina Trail. Remember how you had the paper map and I just had I was just happy to be there?
Yeah.
It was kind of like that. And I had downloaded Gaia and done the free trial of the premium subscription beforehand and was really excited to test out a new map. I don't know if we want to get into that now, but we could. And was like vastly disappointed. I was like, for everything I've heard about Gaia, expecting big things. I expected it to be really cool, really fun to use. I was really excited to get to try a new map that I hadn't used before. And I was just shocked at how anticlimactic it was. I understand the benefits of Gaia and how having more functionality is good for trails like this or more backcountry trails than something far out might have. And I do come from being used to the functionalities on far out, but I was just like lacking excitement about it when I was actually on the app. I downloaded Teton Crest Trails, and it'll show you where you are on this line. But you're supposed to be able to click a spot and click another spot, and it snaps to the line. And then you can see the information that you save in between those two spots. Well, when I would go on and I would click from one spot to another spot, it would do the straight line from one to the other, and it wouldn't snap. So it would give me these elevation profiles that are basically as the bird flies across mountains. Yeah. So it'd be like you're dropping off a cliff, then you're climbing up a cliff. Here's all your elevation gain. It doesn't make any sense. The mileage isn't accurate. And so I could follow myself on the trail when I was looking at my location and I could guesstimate where, because you could click on the trail and it'll show you from start to finish, here's the elevation profile. So it would show me at like mile near the halfway point. And I'd be like, okay, I'm near mile, 15 then, I guess. And it looks like it goes down and up for this amount, I guess. But you can't zoom in on the elevation profile. Like on Far Out, you can be on a trail and you can zoom in on the elevation profile of that trail, and it can have the end point wherever you slide it to when you're zoomed in, and the start point, what I typically do on Far Out, will be my little arrow. So maybe I have 7 miles left in the day, I'll zoom in the trail to say 7 miles, and I'll put the start, like the left side of the screen, at my arrow, and then I know that whole range is 7 miles. The elevation says I'm going up another 1,000 feet. Here's what it looks like. All of that. And on Gaia, it just wouldn't snap any of my lines. So I couldn't use it. And I'm going to let Elise go because I know she has more experience with it. But for me, as someone who downloaded it before the trail, downloaded the maps, thought I did everything right, it was pretty freaking useless.
Yeah.
I understand the frustration with not getting the snap to work, because that's a problem I've had with Gaia, like, the entire time I've had it as well. I was looking into it before this podcast because I was telling Chaunce, I was like, this is the one thing I always have trouble with, and I always forget to look it up until I'm out in the backcountry and can't look it up and can't figure out like why it's not working. And the conclusion I came to, there's a toggle that you have to switch on when you're downloading the route information about, like, I forget what the exact toggle is called, but it's like download route snap to info, I think, something literally like very straightforward. However, I was looking into like Reddit threads and stuff about it, and people still, I think, will have trouble with it even sometimes when they've downloaded that. So it seems to be like a glitch that is something that's known. And then what I was going to say about like the elevation profiles, it does help if you have, like, I had day by day breakdowns that I tried to send the routes to Chaunce, but I think we didn't have like a ton of service when she was trying.
I had service. I got your text and I have it downloaded, but it just opens the app and it doesn't do anything.
Well, and also that might have been me, not because I was sending like while we were like in the midst of a lot of stuff.
Here.
Because I don't know if I sent you the
That's
actual
what she
like
sent to the route, and I click it and it opens Gaia. It says loading, and then it just shows me nothing.
Yeah, I think we might have needed to try again, because I think what I accidentally sent you was, so you can like download an area on Gaia, so you can like draw like a big square around yeah. So that's what I sent you, I think, on accident, instead of like my routes that I made. So you can also like create your day by day routes in Gaia, and that's what I was trying to send her, was the folder with all the trails in it. But I was like, I think I did it like at a gas station rest stop without realizing that. And then by the time we were on the road again, she was like, it'll be fine. And like,
yeah.
But that helps as far as looking at the elevation profile, because you get a smaller chunk. So it's a little more like a little closer to what you're talking about on Far Out. However, it's still hard to pinpoint yourself in the elevation profile. And that's why I think the Snap 2 offline would be super helpful. So you could like say, what does my next 3 miles look like? And something that I also wish that they did, that's actually an All Trails feature, which like All Trails has its huge amounts of pros and cons. But on All Trails, you can like move your little dot around the like trail route itself, and it'll also show you your little dot moving on the elevation profile. So you can say, you can move the dot to 2 miles in, and you'll see, okay, by 2 miles in, I'll be at this far up the climb. Something like that would, I think, be nice to add.
Yeah, Onyx offers that feature as well.
Cool.
I assumed that Gaia did. It's been a long time since I've
and
used
you know
Gaia.
what? It's possible that it, like, I still feel like I'm learning a lot about it. And every time I've taken some classes on it even, and I feel like I'm always learning new things. It's just a matter of like, I think because it's such a robust tool, it's a little bit less easy to find. Like, its advantage is that it's way more robust than Far Out. Like, you get way more information, way more topos. You can create your own routes, whereas Far Out has a very specific purpose of following these long trails. It's not great for like true navigational purposes. Like, you're following the line and that's it, especially if you don't download topos, and that can be like, in my opinion, honestly, I look back and I'm like, that was kind of reckless to not have anything but that like little line I'm following. But it has enough information about that specific trail that you're usually like good. But if you happen to, anyway, I could go on a whole side rant about backcountry nav stuff. But
last thing I'll say about it is I had timed when I was going to download Gaia because excuse me, you can do a 7-day free trial. And I knew that I would only need it for several days so that I could start and cancel the trial before having to pay for it. And so I timed it to do that. Sorry.
Bless you.
Bless you.
And part of what made that feasible for me was that because I'm going with Elise and she has her own set of maps, I didn't feel like I needed to be an expert in it before I went.
Yeah.
I thought it would be a good trail to learn about it and to get familiar with it while using a free trial. That being said, by the time I got back, I had about 17 emails from them about how to use your Gaia, different tools and stuff. So if I were to be using this for a trail where either I wasn't going with someone who I had as a backup for maps, or if it was longer than 7 days and I wasn't specifically trying to do a free trial and cancel it, I think it's worthwhile to download it far enough in advance of when you're leaving so that you can actually read these emails and learn the functionalities, the way that they stagger them and like disperse the info to you, rather than just like downloading it the day before like I did and going in. That was because I knew I was with her and because I didn't want to pay for it.
Yeah. And it honestly is not as intuitive as something like Far Out. But I feel like that's potentially, I've used Onyx a few times, and I've used Caltopo a decent amount as well. Those are, I would feel like, the main other options in that like mapping category. And I feel like all of them kind of have a slight learning curve to them. You just kind of have to like, Cotrex is another really good free one if you're in Colorado. Just throwing that out there.
Okay, that's a good primer on GPS app stuff because, if you're entrenched in the through hiking world, Far Out does make it very easy. Like the learning curve is short.
It's perfect for what we need.
Yeah.
But
yeah, definitely worth doing the tutorials. Like I can do the bare bones of what I need to do with a GPS app, and I'm still learning more every day as well. But yeah, especially if you're going out to a remote place and you don't have an experienced navigator with you, very worthwhile to do as many tutorials as possible to get familiar and comfortable with whatever software you're using. And just looking this up, it looks like the total elevation gain, again, routes vary, but is about 9,000 over the course.
I would say that tracks. And then it also depends on the terminus that you pop out at.
Had we taken the tram, we would have had a lot less elevation gain. But
we had about 1,700 feet without taking it.
Because we didn't take the tram, we had about 10 miles of a climb to start the hike.
Yeah.
Because we had to get into the mountains, and the tram takes you up the mountains, versus if you don't take that, you're going up the mountains on foot.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a bullet point for wildlife. Does it make sense to cover that first, or do you want to do that as part of the daily itinerary?
We could go into like the pre-trail portion of the wildlife, which is just that and we've already talked about this. Like, I realized I was pretty freaking afraid of seeing a grizzly bear. I do not want to die by getting mauled by a grizzly bear. It's just one of the lower ranking options of ways to go. It seems not great in terms of pleasantness. And I typically don't sleep well on trail anyway. So I was really worried about how I would sleep, if at all, due to this newly realized fear. And I think we were just really cautious going into it. Like, we both had talked prior to leaving about kind of how we wanted to play it safe, and we both brought bear cans. Apparently Ursacks are allowed.
I feel like Chaunce witnessed me at my like most scatterbrained, I think, prior to this hike, and I swear I read like hard-sided canisters only, and the ranger was like, nah, an Ursack's good, and I'm like, fuck, because I brought my big ass bear can because it's the only one I have, so that was whatever. I was like, it's good training, but Ursacks are allowed as long as it's I reread the email after because I was like, I'm going crazy, and it says any IBGC approved bear container, and Ursack is an IBGC approved.
So that kind of made us feel a little better, because it was like, okay, if it was something we really, 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 really needed to worry about, it would definitely be beer cans only. So the fact that they allow Ursacks just in reasoning with my own brain, because they allow Ursacs, it must not be as serious of a problem, so I can kind of ease up mentally about this. But we had both brought bear cans. We both had bear spray. I did learn prior to...
Are bear cans required in Glacier National Park?
No. But they
Really?
they require you to hang every single night. I only had a food bag on the entire... I didn't have an Ursac. I didn't have a bear can on the entire CDT. Besides Rocky Mountain. Rocky Mountain requires a bear can. That's a side tangent.
Yeah.
It'll get long. But yeah, Glacier, but they have poles. They have like a system at every single campsite. So it's very easy to properly hang your food.
Got it.
And I will just say, if you're ever going to only hang your food, just really look into the proper hangs, because we saw a bear climb a tree. And
We did. But back to like the prep stuff. So we both had bear spray, and something interesting that I learned, and I'm just trying to go back to see the messaging around it, but something that I had realized the night before when I was packing, because yes, Rachel, I do save it for the night before. What I realized was that the can of bear spray that I had was expired. It expired in August of 2023, and I didn't realize that bear spray expires. So that was kind of shocking for me, and I had posted about it asking, does this matter? Right? Just like you get a backpacking meal that expired. Like, does that actually matter? Or is this important? Because I don't want to have a grizzly bear running at me and go to spray something that's expired and it just doesn't have any bitterness
like the Looney Tunes,
to it.
the puff sign comes out.
Yeah, it's just air. Yeah. So I was like, I don't know. Do I replace this? And the general response I had gotten was that when it expires, it can like slowly leak from the can. It starts to, I wish I could find the message that had explained it, because it made sense, but it was like, it'll start to slowly leak out. And so expired cans are more likely to leak and not be effective was generally the messaging that I kept getting. And the nice thing that, and then Dane-ish, Patreon, said, bear spray accidentally depressed in, I could tell you that bear spray accidentally depressed in the trunk of a car while opening said trunk is not fun. My best friend can also tell you that may or may not have happened to us in April. So it'll depress, I guess. Either way, I got new bear spray because I wanted to make sure it wasn't expired. But one thing I haven't done yet that I really want to, which was also a suggestion I got as feedback, was that if you do have a can of bear spray that's expired, use it to just know what it feels like to spray it. That way, when you actually do have to spray it, you've already done it before and you know what it's going to be like. Yeah. So I thought that was a great suggestion.
Patreon content?
I'm down. Yeah. I've got it in the car.
We kept meaning to pull aside and use it, and we just kept... Is it in my car?
No, it's in my house. We brought the bags in.
Yeah, we kept meaning to do it, and we just like never found a good time. But.
Yeah, we had a lot of mishaps happen that distracted us from that.
Yeah.
But okay, back to the main point. We brought bear spray. We each had bear spray on us, accessible. Elise kept it on her hip belt. I kept it in my shoulder pocket. And then the other thing that we did to be safe around bears was we agreed that anytime we were cooking a meal, we would cook away from camp. So we would stop a mile before camp and have dinner, and we'd do our cooking, and then we'd hike the last mile to camp.
Next to somebody else's tent.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Inside of it, actually. And so we didn't want to have any scents at camp, so we were very clear about we're eating before we get to camp. We're just going to seal our bear cans when we get there. We had also heard that you should make, from Stu, that like triangle of where you even pee. Mm-hmm. So we made it a point to make sure we were peeing far away from our camps, which was really scary at night when you had to wake up and leave your tent to use the bathroom. Yeah. But whatever, if that's how I'm meant to go.
The recommendation is 100 yards, is that right?
I don't know. We did far away, but I don't know.
I don't think it was 100 yards though.
Yeah, we did. But some spots there you couldn't go 100 yards away from where we were without going to either the trail or to water. Like the first night when it was the trail on one side, the water on the other.
Yeah.
We went as far the other way as we could.
A football field is a long ways to go in the middle of the
yeah,
night.
that is a long ways
we
to go.
did go, like a decent, like we weren't peeing outside our tents, but and one thing I want to say about the bear spray real quick before we move on is if you have a Sierra by you, pick it up there. It's like half the price of REI, or at least like that's what I've noticed.
I got a 2-pack for $59.
Yeah,
Nice.
and that's the price of like one at REI, I think.
But there was also options, and some of them had different levels of concentration, so I picked the most heavily concentrated. Obviously, I didn't need 2, but that's why I got the 2-pack. But I had also heard from people that were responding to my expiration post about how some cans will disperse 3 to 4 seconds of spray, which I think is standard. Mine, when I checked, said 4 seconds. But you can also find cans that'll disperse 7 to 8 seconds. So if you are a worrier, maybe go for a can that has 7 to 8 seconds if you can find one, because that's just like double the cloud.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or you have got 2 shots maybe if you need it. And I also think you did really well with like she was very much like worried on the drive, and I remember feeling that way before I feel like once you spend enough time in grizzly country without a bad encounter, you're kind of, I don't want to say desensitized. I'm still very careful, and I was really glad we were on the same page with that. I would say definitely check that before you go into grizzly country with someone, because I've definitely had experiences where people are not as cautious, and they'll like be eating and like dropping crumbs all around their tent, and like we're all set up next to each other, and like for me that's really anxiety inducing, and I'm like it makes it a harder experience, a less fun experience for me. So it was awesome that we were on the same page, and I feel like you also did not freak out like that much at all when we were on trail.
Yeah.
Did you get the good drugs?
I think if Elise had, like, if I had heard Elise eating wrappers in her tent at night, I would have not had an enjoyable time.
Yeah.
And so it was really good that we checked in with each other beforehand, and we're like, hey, how do we feel about this? What are you thinking in terms of what you're going to do to be cautious? Does that align with what I'm going to do? Am I comfortable doing this hike with you based on your, plan?
Yeah. Because you were losing sleep about this prior to the hike.
Yeah, I got a refill on my panic attack pills that I use when I fly, and I took them every night. And I also slept with headphones in with noise canceling and an audiobook playing, and it woke me up a couple times because I can't sleep when there's noise in my ears, but I can sleep better than when I'm listening to everything.
Yeah.
So I think the combination of all of that together made it good for me. But I also think because we didn't see any bears apart from the cub that we saw on the drive to the trailhead, that helped.
We also didn't see any signs of bears, really.
Yeah.
Like I saw maybe 1 or 2 bear scats, but they were old. And so I think that's another thing that helps to get familiar with. There's like a few different signs you can look for, like scratches on the trees. Scat is an easy one, prints obviously, and knowing like where the bear habitats are, because that way you like know when you need to worry and how much you need to worry. Like there were certain parts of the CDT where we would just see bear scratches everywhere, fresh scat, like paw prints in the mauled animal parts.
Yeah,
like
if I saw any of that, I would have been losing my shit.
Yeah, and I was definitely more cautious on those nights, like, and there was probably only one night on the CDT in grizzly country that I like slept with my food, and I would never, I'm not saying to do that, but it was like pouring down rain and we like took forever to find a campsite. It was dark and like I was with other people, and the only reason I like felt even okay just like basically like submitting myself to that is because we hadn't seen a single sign of bears all day. Doesn't mean they weren't there, and doesn't mean it was smart, but I knew like I hadn't passed like a fresh pile of bear scat a mile before camp. Like,
well, even when we got to Holly Lake, there were those trees that had those markings on them, and it didn't look like scratches, but I was still like, Elise, what does that look like to you? Because I wasn't sure at first, and if she came back and she was like, yeah, that looks like grizzly bear scratches, I would not have slept well at all that night.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, I think it was either just like natural bark peeling or sometimes antlered animals like rub against trees and they create rubs. And those are just like little patches of bark coming off. Whereas the scratches that I've seen are always literally look like claw marks on a tree.
Apart from bears, we saw 4 moose. Morning 1, leaving while we were packing up camp and having breakfast, just along the trail, just like they were commuting to work. It was a mama moose and a little baby moose just strolling past, and we were like, "Ooh, so cute." And then the next day we had seen 2. One was a little smaller, and one had just like a huge set of antlers.
Yeah, more mature buck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were both really pretty.
Is buck the right word for a male moose?
No
A bull.
idea.
A bull.
Bull,
I was like, that's
yeah.
not right.
Yeah.
Yeah, a bit more mature bull. And then the first one we saw was a younger bull.
Yeah.
They were both still in velvet, which was cool. So like their antlers were still covered in the velvety like fur that they have until they rub that off, and that's like part of why they create the rubbings. But
Yeah. So they were really pretty. Nothing too close, nothing scary. All like a good distance away.
Safe
Not
moose
so far that
encounters.
it doesn't feel real. You know, not so far that you're like, does that count? But not close enough that you're starting to panic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that was good. We saw lots of marmots.
Marmots.
The chocolate
The
marmots.
chocolate booty marmots.
Oh, there was these chocolate little sploot booty marmots. And
Oh, what now?
sploot booties. You know when a dog puts its back paws to the side and its booty just kind of spoots out?
Sure, yeah.
These chocolate marmots were doing that.
They were
Okay.
splooting.
And they tell them about the chocolate.
I mean, I just have never seen a marmot that color.
Yeah.
Like the ones that we have in Colorado are typically like a light golden kind of brown, and these ones were like dark chocolatey
Yeah.
colors. It
They
was
looked like a
just-
chocolate bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we were calling them chocolate marmots. And they were so cute. They're cuter than the chestnut marmots,
Okay.
which is what I've named the other ones.
Dark marmots.
Well, and I think the chestnut marmots I think their species is yellow-bellied marmot, and I don't know what the chocolate marmot. I'm assuming it's a different species.
Oh, they were so pretty.
Yeah.
They were so pretty and majestic and
Yeah.
cute. And they had these darker tails. And just the one that was splooting on the trail was so cute. We were just sitting there like this, watching it. So lots of marmots.
I saw one pika, which are rare these days. I feel like I used to see pikas
Yeah.
all the time.
I
and
saw
like,
a couple, yeah.
yeah, now it's only like super, super high up. And
There was a sign when we started the trail asking, they wanted like feedback on if you had seen any bighorn sheep or goats or anything. I guess they're doing research or trying to gather info on them. We didn't see any. And then the other animal we saw there was a deer that came into camp the last night. And we tried to set up our tents close together. That was another thing that made me feel comfortable. But we were set up where I could lay down and see out the bottom of my tent through the vestibule and into the other campsites. And as the sun is getting really dark, I see this like tan yellow body just coming in. And I'm like, that's it. Here we go. This is what we've been waiting for. This is what we've prepped for. Mind you, I'm on panic attack medicine. So it was probably literally that tone of just like, okay.
This is the end.
Sure, here we go. I saw its head and it was a deer. And I was like, you got me. And then the sun set while it was still over there. So I was a little worried it would walk around and it would freak me out. But I didn't really hear from it again after that. And that was our wildlife. Yeah.
Before we get into the day-by-day breakdown, I also want to talk about water.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Didn't even stop looking even. We were
Yeah,
just
I
like,
could have carried a liter and no
Yeah.
more and been absolutely fine.
Okay.
we were like, we got to a point where we'll be like, when we run out of this water, we'll stop at the next one.
Instead of preemptively filling, it would just be like, when we run out, we'll just look for a spot and refill then.
Do you know, was it a high snow year or a rainy spring?
I do believe the Rockies at least have definitely had a high snow year. I'm not sure if that translates all the way up to
The Tetons?
Wyoming. Yeah, but Colorado had a high snow year this year for late, and it melted late because we
Yeah.
had a very cold May. So yeah, I would assume so, but I'm not sure. And it's also you're in glacier territory, so like we saw glaciers and stuff, and so I would imagine it's just like usually a fair amount of water.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll get into this in the day-by-day breakdown, but that was something that was kind of comical to me. Like a day before we left, I'm doing all this worrying about grizzly bears, and Elise sends me a voicemail from a ranger that's like, yeah, you're probably going to want to bring an ice axe. There's still considerable snow on Paintbrush Divide, so bring an ice axe. And I don't own an ice axe because on the PCT I had a whip it, and I also flipped past the Sierra. So I'm like, okay, gotta go to REI and buy an ice axe. So I guess I have time and energy to divert fear of bears to fear of snow, which I hadn't planned for. And that ended up being a lot scarier than the bears. But we'll get into that when it comes up in the itinerary.
And the climbs. Obviously, we covered that as about 9,000 feet of gain.
They were so gradual.
Yeah.
They were so nice.
And the nice thing, too, is they were kind of all at once. It wasn't like a bunch of up, downs. It was just you're going up, and then you'll go down, or then you'll stay flat. And then you'll go up. Like, it's very committing to what it wants to do. You are going up, then you're going up for a while. If you're going down, you're going down for a while. If you're staying flat for a while. So you could kind of just program your mindset to be like, okay, we're climbing until lunch, and then it flattens out.
Cool. Yeah, I'd agree.
Very kind graded.
Very much like
graded
go
trail.
over a pass and then stay up high, or go back down to a valley, go over another pass.
Yeah.
And maybe this makes more sense to do in the day-by-day breakdown, but just the landscapes overall, did it live up to the hype? Because I
Yes.
recall Moose Juice hyping this up to be like the most beautiful short hike
It was,
out there.
yeah.
For
Mile
40
mile
miles,
was
you get your bang for your
incredible.
buck.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And we'll go into that.
And
Sweet.
also, just the Tetons in general, I'd never been. It is wild how they just, it's like a flat field, and then these just huge peaks. Like, the prominence is bananas.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I was expecting. I'd never been to the Tetons, but it was the most, like, dramatic view. And it, like, looks fake. It looks like somebody dropped a backdrop on top of this, like, prairie area. And it's just these dramatic, beautiful peaks.
Yeah.
And I was like, we're going up in there.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
That's the cool thing about these mountains is even in Colorado, you get really cool mountains, but it all goes up and then you get the peaks. Whereas with the Tetons, it feels like you're in this flat prairie area, and from the ground, it goes up, makes one mountain, and comes back down. And then there's another one that just goes up from that same prairie area, makes another mountain, and comes back down, instead of it all going up together and then peaking at the top. So they really look a lot more dramatic because they're all so kind of individualized in appearance, which was really cool. It also is fun that they were named by the French because they looked like boobs.
Mhm.
That's what Teton apparently
I thought it was
derives
the
from.
Native Americans. Oh, is it French? Okay.
I guess a French guy had just like gone through and been like, these look like tits.
Yeah.
Our theory is that he just hadn't seen a woman
He hadn't
in
seen a
years.
woman in a while. There's some pretty
Really
ugly
like to
tits.
travel between those two mountains right there.
Yeah.
Do a yo-yo.
Yeah.
I'm sure that we should probably look up the native names, because I'm sure there are
I'm sure
different
they
names.
had better
Yeah.
names. They probably.
Yeah. Cool. Does it make sense to jump into the day-by-day at this point?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
we
Which starts.
Start in Denver.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went and picked up Chaunce. I live in Summit, so I like drove to her because it just made sense logistically. And then we kind of like went back and forth on who would drive.
We were being kind.
And
So-
we were both, neither one of us wanted to be like too aggressive of like, I want to drive my car.
So here's the thing: is I knew Elise's car had trouble previously. I knew she had just gotten like
For context, I just replaced my entire transmission.
Yes, so she had just done that. But it was Elise's hike that she invited
Didn't
me
it break
on.
down from a different hike or something?
The transmission has been an issue for a long time, and when I was coming back from the Grand Canyon,
That's what it
I
was.
went off the road because the way the transmission was broken. I have a Subaru. It's supposed to have all-wheel drive. It was functioning only as front-wheel drive. I didn't know that. And so I was on like a semi-muddy, well, actually it was pretty muddy. I went off the road because I think that it was not functioning properly. So I had to get like pulled out by a farmer. That was a whole saga, but yeah.
So I had messaged her and I was like, or she had messaged me one of the ways, and we were talking about the cars, and she was like, do you want me to come pick you up? And I was like, sure. And I had offered my car. I was like, we could take my car if you want, since I know yours just like had some work done. And she was like, oh no, it's fixed from that. But she
I
was
didn't
also
want you to
being
feel like
kind
you
back.
Yeah, I didn't want you to feel like you had to drive, but I also didn't feel strongly about driving. I was just kind of
Right.
like, and we neither of us really like.
And I didn't want to push it. I didn't want to be like, your car's a piece of shit. Let's take my car. It's new. You know, like I didn't want to be a bitch. So
Yeah.
I was like, sure, that's fine. I'm like, whatever's more comfortable. I'm just happy to be here. Go with the flow. No worries. And
Which
she had,
helped. That
she had
attitude
gotten
helped.
to my house and her car already had all her stuff in it. And we didn't really bring up the topic again. And I didn't want to be like, if she wanted to drive, I didn't want to keep being like, well, we should take my car and have her be like offended by that.
But I
So-
didn't necessarily want to drive. We just
Right.
didn't communicate well.
we just were both
A couple
trying to
of
be
type
too kind.
Bs,
Yeah.
Battling it out.
So we took Elise's car.
Yeah. And all that hype makes it sound like there was something. Well, okay, so we get
Let's
pretty
say the order of what we thought it was, and
yeah,
then the
yeah.
reveal.
We get pretty far out of Colorado, and
4 hours.
Yeah, we're in Wyoming, and what was fun about this drive actually, it was like it's basically like a drive along the divide. So we were driving through a bunch of CDT trail towns, so I was like familiar with these places, and my oil light comes on like a little ways outside of Rawlins. I think we were like 60 miles from Rawlins, which is like a little town in Wyoming, southern Wyoming, and I was like, we can stop in Rawlins. I'll like go to a quick lube place because I knew I had changed my oil like exactly 3,400 miles before that. And I was like, I wonder, basically, I was like, it shouldn't be bad yet because it's synthetic. And so I should have more time. So maybe our theory was like, maybe just the oil sensor was just turning on because like
it had been 3,000
the
miles.
computer is like programmed or whatever.
Yeah, we're girls in a car.
Yeah, and it's a new to me car. I bought it like a year and a half ago, but it's, you know, it has 100,000 miles on it. It was used. And so I don't know like all those little quirks yet. And so that was our theory. We're like, we'll just have them look at it in Rawlins. We'll get lunch. I'll show you like Rawlins. It's like not anything special, but it's like special to me. So I was like, okay, blah, blah, blah. Like 10 miles outside of Rawlins, which, mind you, is the basin, the Great Divide Basin.
It's like 100 degrees out.
It's super hot. There's nothing but sagebrush. Like, there's nothing on the sides of these
Literally
highways.
nothing.
It's not like a Midwest highway where there's billboards and, like, rest stops. There's just nothing. And all of a sudden, the engine starts losing power. And I'm like, and I'm going, oh, shit. And Chaunce goes, what's happening? I go, something bad. And I just start pulling over because this is also like one of those highways where the speed limit's like 80. And so I'm like, I'm just going to try and get as far off the road as I can while the car's still moving. RPM, like I'm trying to press on the gas. The RPMs are going up. The miles per hour are just going down. And so with the context of the oil light, we're like, fuck, what happened?
And the last time something like this has happened to me was when I was living out of a Ford pickup truck, a manual, and I was driving through Olympia, Washington, and my timing belt snapped in the middle of the highway. And it was the same thing where it was like, I'm trying to accelerate, nothing's happening, and I have to get to the shoulder. And I remembered how I felt in that setting and was just like, I've got to keep everything very lighthearted right now so Elise doesn't panic.
Chaunce was amazing. I literally am sitting there like shaking because I'm like, what just happened and how do we deal with this? And John's just like, it's gonna be fine.
I think I cracked a beer.
Yeah. And I also was like, felt like guilty because I was like, I brought Chaunce on this trip and my car just broke down in the middle of nowhere. I felt so bad. And I was like, I just had this feeling like it, of course, for a person with anxiety, it's like the worst thing because it like confirms like all your worst fears. So I'm immediately like, I have AAA. I'm going to call AAA. They like make you go through the online process. They say that a tow truck's coming in an hour. They like say, do you have a place you want it to tow? And I'm like, well, I'll like look at places in Rawlins. Like, I feel like I trust the people in Rawlins based on nothing other than I enjoyed my time there on the CDT. And so I start calling like repair shops. Well, Chaunce is just like, it's going to be fine. We're all good. She's like, we've got time. Like, we weren't supposed to get there until like, she's just like talking me through it, keeping me much more calm than I would have been otherwise. We get a hold of one of the repair shops and they're like, by the way, if you're waiting for a tow from AAA, they will sometimes send people from like Fort Collins, which is like we're like 2 or 3 hours away. Yeah. So they're like, just make sure that they're not doing that. See if you can find where your tow truck's coming from. I'm so grateful that lady said that. They also were like, we can look at your car first thing in the morning. We don't have time today. So we were like, okay, we're going to get the car towed to Rawlins and we're going to stay in Rawlins. Like, I was like, I know hotels there at least. Yeah. And I have a bar we can go to. Like, it'll be a good time.
Cop car pulls up. We made a cop friend.
Highway patroller. And he was like, you guys all good? And he ended up actually calling. So anyway.
Yeah, go back.
AAA gives me an ETA of 302. This is at like 2:10 that I had summoned the tow truck.
Yeah.
But they also say, like, we'll send the status of your truck once it's gone. And they have these little icons and they're really annoying because you can't click on what they mean, but it kind of looks like the first one is like request received and the second one is a picture of a tow truck, so I'm assuming that means tow truck sent, but that never like lit up. And I kept sending status and it kept just being like check your status at any time. And it just kept saying the same thing, and it wasn't saying that they had sent a truck. Call AAA. Call them like 3 times.
They like can't tell us where it's from. It's like 3:45 now. We asked them, where are you sending the tow truck from? They said a place. I Googled a place. There's 2 locations. I'm like, this location or this location? They read me the phone number. It is the phone number of neither, but it's closer to one of them. So I'm like, okay, you must be in this place. Your phone number is not correct either way, but the area code's the same. I call that tow truck place, and I'm like, hey, wanted to get a check-in. AAA's useless. Do you have an estimate? And they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, don't you have a tow truck coming for a Subaru? And they're like, we have a tow truck going out for a truck, and we have a tow truck going out for a camper van. And I was like, are either of them near Rollins? And they're like, no, they're hours away from that. And I was like, do you have anyone else? Like, do you have anyone coming to this one? And they're like, no, we know nothing about that.
And so at that point, the highway patroller's like, well, and also this lady had recommended this place in town. She was like, just call Jack's and like have them reimburse you through AAA basically. And so luckily we had an alternative. It's just annoying because we could have called them right away. It took the guy like 20 minutes to show up.
And like, what if we hadn't known that? And what if we were just sitting there waiting for AAA 4 hours. And they were telling us that they sent someone and they actually hadn't done anything?
And so what happened is the patroller, we got a cop car hitch. The patroller ended up taking us to like a truck stop so that we could hang out there while we waited for the tow truck in Rollins. And then he was going to basically come pick us up from the truck stop and then go get my car. So at this point, we're at the truck stop. It literally takes this guy like 10 minutes to get there.
Fast.
We're like, we didn't even have to go to the truck stop. We'd already been melting in the car for like an hour and a half at that point.
We barely got to the bathroom.
And I'm like also then meanwhile trying to cancel AAA. Can't even get a hold of them to cancel the tow truck. As he pulls up, they call me and they're like, hey, we finally basically like secured your tow truck. We have all the details confirmed, blah, blah, blah. She's like, unfortunately, it's going to take like 4, she's like just rattling all this off before I can like say cancel it. But she's like, it's unfortunately going to take like over at least 4 hours for them to get there.
100 degrees outside.
Literally like.
We are sweating in a car.
Yeah. And so I was like, you can cancel it. Like I tried to cancel it. I tried to call you guys to cancel it. Like I couldn't get through, cancel it. Like we're good. We're good.
We don't want anything to do with you. Go away.
Which they are hopefully going to reimburse me. So I hope no one from AAA listens to this because I do hope to get to that.
Or if you work at AAA,
well, change the interface of the like texting system. Don't have it put an ETA on there if you haven't even sent a truck. I don't understand that. Anyway, Jack, or I don't know what his name was actually, but we're going to call him Jack because it's Jack's Towing. Just like a classic Wyoming guy. He's like, he puts us in the like front seat of the tow truck. We start driving. We're like, there's my car. He flips a U-ey on the highway, like goes through the median. And she's like, we're off-roading.
I was like, woo!
We're off-roading in a tow truck. I was like, whoa. I didn't know this could, I guess it makes sense. They can do a lot of shit. But that was kind of fun. And then they like get my car on. We take it to Mountain West Motors, which is the place, shout out to them kind of. And in Rollins that we had contacted.
They can't look at it until the morning. And so they recommended a place down the road that we go to get a room. And we walk outside of Mountain West Motors. And just in front of us, almost like glowing with a halo, is a bar called Hole in the Wall, which Elise knew from the CDT because it forced her to 00. And so we're just looking at this mecca.
I was just like, how is this literally across the street from that bar? It felt like I got sucked into like a vortex of CDT trail towns.
Do you want to give the backstory of what happened the first
so
time?
I'm putting myself on blast here, but like we had hiked through the first part of the basin. You do like 60 miles of basin-ish before you get to Rollins, and then the big chunk of it's after that on your way to Lander. But you still hike through like some desolate territory, and there's like this 35-mile roadwalk that a lot of people take as an alternate because it's faster. So that's what we had done the day before. We had finished the hike in that day, like 14 or 15 miles, and went straight to this bar. And the bartender at the time was just like on top of it. They serve their beers in these like 16-ounce like iced mugs. And I just remember like I would have like a quarter of the mug left and she'd be like, you want another? And I'd be like, sure. And like I hadn't eaten enough yet. Like we went and ended up getting Thai food in the middle of like being at this bar, but like I'd already consumed probably like 3 beers. And then all these bars in Wyoming also have these dice game that you can play.
It's so fun.
And so I remember we were all playing that, and then like there's these mystery shots you can buy at this bar, and some like older guys were like what are you ladies doing? Like, you know, like
This
buying
is
us
when she was on
mystery
the
shots.
CDT, to clarify.
Yeah, and Josh at one point, he's very much like a I go to bed early kind of guy, so he like had dipped, and like these guys were buying us shots, and I'm hanging out with my like girlfriends on trail, and we're all just like having a good time. I still don't feel like I drank like, yes, I drank a lot that night, but not like, you know, not to the level I have in previous times in my life. And we like went to other bars and stuff, like whatever. I had the worst hangover I've ever had in my life, and I got kind of sick after just the 3 beers we had at Hole in the Wall the other night. So it's like, maybe it's something in like the beer, like a specific beer
you
there.
You were drinking the tap water at our sketchy motel too, though. Not sketchy motel, but it was fine.
It was a fine, cute little place. But yeah,
I wouldn't have drank the tap water.
Fair enough. Anyway, it was like one of the worst. Like the plan at the time on the CDT, my friends had made friends with this hairdresser in town. They were all going to go get mullets, and I was like going to go get my hair cut too. I was so hungover I could not. I slept in the back of this man's truck while they were getting their haircuts, and they were like trying to nurse me back to health. They like went and got McDonald's. We like went to a different bar to like try and give me a Bloody Mary to see if that would help. Like nothing was. I couldn't throw up. I remember trying to go in the public bathroom in the Rollins like City Park and like trying to puke. Couldn't do it. I was like, there's no way I'm hiking out today. Like I don't know. And then, but I felt so bad because Josh like really was like eager to get going. He was like, what time are you coming back? Like, we've got to go. And I was just like, we'll be back in an hour. Like, and then I just like wasn't admitting that there was no way in hell that I was going to walk anywhere that day. We get to the hotel. He's like kind of upset with me. He's already checked out. Like all our stuff's out of our room. And I walk into the lobby and I like sit down on the couch, and he's like, he didn't want to like, we were kind of having like a confrontation about it because he was upset that we weren't hiking out. And he was like, come talk to me in this room. And there's just like a computer room. We get in there. I literally like lay in a fetal position on the floor. and I'm like, no, I can go. And he's like, you're in a fetal position on the floor just trying to talk to me about this. Like, there's no way you're hiking out today. Like we have to get another night at this hotel.
My favorite part is that you have fond memories of this town.
Well, I don't feel like it was their fault that I like couldn't function. That was on me, you know, for probably just not eating enough before I drank that night. And also probably being dehydrated. Like it was a whole, you know, recipe for disaster that I should have foreseen. And anyway, yeah, so that was Rollins. And so when we were going back, I was like, oh my God, Rollins.
Imagine coming out of this car shop after this hitch, after being really hot, feeling kind of like in despair about how is this hike gonna go, how far is this gonna set us back, what could be wrong with this car, and we see Hole in the Wall, the place with all of those memories for
her. I was
her.
like, it's a sign. Yeah, it's just like it was meant to be. We were supposed to break down. I don't know why that's how I took it, but I was grasping for straws.
Yeah, that's glass half full right there.
So I was like, beers?
Yeah, of course. And the bartender was the same bartender so my friends who were along in this journey with were very outgoing people. Like they just like any town we went to, they ended up like besties with the locals. And they had like gone to her concert. Like she played saxophone, I think. And like, so they knew her, and I like brought them up. I was like, do you remember my friends DG and Franzia? And she was like, oh yeah, I do. Like, so that's like, it was a walk down memory lane.
Yeah. And then we stayed at a place up the road, signed the hiker log because we were about to do a hike, but then we got messages from some of the people on the CDT that had seen our name, which was really fun. And then we'll circle back, but we ended up seeing them.
Yeah.
But then that night, this is just like a side tangent, if you have not yet watched the Netflix documentary Man with 1,000 Kids, wild. Super wild. There's this dude that has like
I've heard about this.
Done like
sperm donated.
Yeah, over 3,000 kids they think.
Unethically,
like they banned him from donating more sperm. I don't think he's gonna
in the
stop.
Netherlands though.
Yeah, I don't think he's gonna
still
stop.
do it. Yeah.
But it's like the math behind how much that can fuck things up when your kids have kids and the number grows.
Yeah,
like
you want a diverse DNA
like
line.
the chance of like incest happening is pretty high, especially when you go down 3 generations from these 3,000 kids.
Yeah, because it's gonna be hard, and he won't disclose like a list. Like the moms are trying to make a list basically, and they have like a certain amount of names, but like like they basically their kids are gonna have to like check a database before they can date people.
And like they like scammed a lot of people that went on this database thinking that there were a lot of different donors, but it was really just him and one other dude, and they'd like Russian roulette their sperm to see like to guess. Yeah, it's crazy. Watch the show. It's 3 episodes.
It's worth it. We
It's so
downloaded
worth
some
it.
and ended up watching it on the trail. 'Cause
Yeah, we watched it night
We
one.
only stayed up for the first one the first night.
Yeah.
But in the morning, we show up to Mountain West Motors, and they're like, or no, they called me, and they were like,
No, this is the best part. Sorry. So the cop had asked Elise in the car. He was like, "Have you gotten a car from any tow trucks yet?" And Elise was like, "No, just scam calls." And I'm like, interesting.
No,
Like I didn't
that's
say
not what-
anything,
that's
but
not
I'm
what
like,
happened.
huh.
That is-
And she's like, "Yeah, I block all spam numbers." And I'm
No.
like, interesting.
that's not what happened. Okay, so one of the, and among all the calls to AAA, one of them, they were like, dispatch is having trouble getting through to you. Do you have any numbers that like can't call you? And I was like, I mean, I block spam callers. So, you know, when your phone says scam likely and I get the same call from someone like 6 times in a row, I blocked that number because I'm like, leave me alone. I did not get a call that day.
Okay,
I did not
okay.
block them that day.
But
No
that
calls had
wasn't
come through.
relevant yet at that part. But the
But-
part that was relevant was the next morning, Elise's phone starts to ring. And I'm
And
like,
it says
"Do
scam
you
likely."
think it's the car shop?" And she goes, "No, it says spam likely." And I was like, "Do you think you maybe should answer it just in case?"
And I'm glad she said that, and I did.
Because it was the car
But
shop.
here's the thing. When that happens, if I wouldn't have answered it, would have gone to voicemail. He would have left me a voicemail. I would have called back. But I don't like block them right away. It takes like 6 calls before I block a number.
Yeah.
And no voicemails. But anyway, so valid point. I will like be more I will take more discretion into that scam likely clear like thing that Apple does now, because clearly it's just a number that's maybe not in your contacts. I didn't know that. Anyway, he's like, honey, I think you might be a little embarrassed, unfortunately. Like,
I love that he calls you honey.
yeah, there was some context there that
Yeah.
he was like, I'm pretty sure you just ran out of gas. And so I'm like relieved, because we were going through like, what are the we were talking about renting a U-Haul. We were talking about like Garrett coming and getting us if like worst case, like we were like, here's how we can still do the hike if it's like a $3,000 repair. I was like, that's my threshold, and that will like, she was like, what's your threshold for like if you need to get it fixed? Do we just come back after? We were going through everything. I'm like, running out of gas is awesome, because we were thinking about the oil light. We're like, did I just destroy my engine, basically like driving with no oil for 30 minutes? And so that was like that's the worst case scenario. I'm going to have to buy a new car, basically. And so when he says I ran out of gas, I'm like, honestly, I'm relieved.
Yeah.
I love that. I hope that that's the
It
issue.
said I had half a tank.
Yeah.
but-
I had 3. So like, again, new-ish to me car. It has like little like blocks instead of a meter, like a needle meter for the fuel levels. And it basically had 3 little blocks, which is a quarter of a tank. And I remember looking.
So it's a digital display.
Yes, it's a digital
Seems
display.
silly.
And so I remember looking at it when the oil light came on and being like, oh, well, like, we're going to get gas in Rollins anyway. Like, I could either top off the oil, or like, we'll go to a quick lube place and we'll get gas. We'll get lunch in Rollins, whatever. Like, I had enough gas to get to Rollins. So I was like super confused, because I was like, that's awesome. However, I know I literally looked at that. And I think even had a conversation with Chaunce about it. Like, we'll get gas there, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. It wasn't like, and usually I have a thing that comes on that says like low oil level. It's like a light that
Low gas level.
low gas. Like, it says please refuel. And that didn't happen. So then I'm like, to him, I'm like, well, is my gas gauge broken then? Like, is my fuel gauge broken? And he's like, it kind of made it seem like they hadn't really looked at anything else. They just were like, you know, like, you were running on fumes. We put half a tank in it. We just drove it 6 miles and it was fine. And I'm like, okay, but did you look at anything else? Because either my fuel gauge is broken, or like I was worried about the oil. And he was like, he like hadn't even known about the oil light. It was weird.
You guys are
and
gonna have to
so-
pretend like I'm here for a second. I have to run to the bathroom.
all good. This is kind of drawn out anyway. We can kind of get to it. But I like asked him to check that stuff. He like calls his mechanic back. They check that stuff. It's all good. They like say it's all good. And I'm like, all right, well, honestly, I'm going to take this as a win, because running out of gas is like the best thing that could have happened. It's like very cheap repair. I mean, I had to pay for the diagnostic of, hey, you ran out of gas, which was embarrassing. But I was grateful that that's all it was. We drive, pick up the car, you know, we have breakfast, pick up the car, drive like 10 miles out of town, and the oil light turns on again. And so we call them, and they're like, bring it back right away. And so we bring it back, and I luckily had done some research in the meantime of like, why did my oil light turn on? Because I love reading a forum about Subarus, just because it's taught me a lot. And basically a lot of the threads were saying that like it's common for the software or the firmware in the oil levels to basically trigger if it's a little bit low. It doesn't necessarily mean like your oil is like bad or needs to be changed, but like if it's like even half a quart low, it'll trigger that oil light, and they have updates for it if you want to update it. But basically I determined that because my oil levels looked pretty fine and there was no like oil pressure issues and any other issues that appeared to be wrong with the car, that maybe it was just bad timing, and like that oil light thing happened right before somehow like the heat made me run out of gas early. Like our only theory is like we were going uphill and the air conditioning was on and like it just went and the fuel level was just wrong. Like and so now we like didn't let it go below half a tank for the rest of the trip. But basically they topped, when we took it back to the shop the second time, they topped it off with like a quart of oil and sent us on our way.
We were good to go after that.
Yeah, and we didn't have any other issues after that.
No. The only downside to it was that we were further behind than where we had hoped to be that day. So we were still able to get on trail the same night that we had hoped to. However, the last tram out of Jackson Hole leaves at 5 p.m. and we had gotten to drop off our car at like 4:03.
Well, we got to the ranger station. And we had to pick up our permits.
Yeah.
And then we had to drive to the trailhead, and then we were going to have to hitch all the way to Jackson Hole, which is like a 45-minute hitch.
When we dropped off the car after doing the whole ranger thing, it was like 4:30. And so there was just no way for us to, even with the most effective, like, timed hitch, there was no way for us to make that last tram. So it was kind of just like, okay, well, if we want to get on trail tonight, we're going to take Granite Canyon Trail and just do the uphill. We could have done the tram in the morning as a different option.
Changed our permits maybe. But.
Yeah. But at that point, we were kind of just really wanting to get on trail. So we figured, let's do Granite Canyon Trail. And it's nice it would have been really nice to take the tram and see those views going up. And it would have been obviously nice to not have to do that elevation gain. But it wasn't a terrible climb up. We had a really nice campsite on a river. We saw that bear hitching to Granite Canyon Trail. It was like a mile from the trailhead. And those two moose walked past our camp in the morning. Mm-hmm. So all things considered, it was a nice alternative. Mm-hmm. The tram would have been really fun. If I were to go back and have the time to have done the tram, I probably still would have picked that just because a tram is fun.
Mm-hmm. It is $50 a person, just if you intend to do that. But they were really flexible with us. Like, we ended up getting a refund.
Yeah. They would have let us take it at the end because we went to go see them at the end. And they would have let us do the tram anyway if we wanted to, but we were just hiking through there, so I don't think this is going to give us any better views. That's now going to be worth the $50.
Plus we wanted to dig around in Jackson.
Yeah. So. We wanted to look at cowboy boots. So they refunded it. So that was really great. It was just, as long as you haven't picked up your tickets yet, they were flexible. It's kind of the impression I got. Mm-hmm. So now we're on trail.
Yeah. And I would just want to say shout out to Chaunce again for being so flexible through all of that, because I was like, oh, we're not going to be able to take the tram, and I was just like feeling bad that felt like it was my fault. And she was like, did not make me feel bad about it, and was like, whatever, we're just going with flow, like it's gonna be fine. And it was, and it, like, I think that attitude like helped me bring that attitude into it, and it was like much more smooth sailing, I think, than it could have been otherwise. But then there was that lady at the trailhead that was kind of, so we saw this bear, like, I'm like, bear, we're like in this hitch in like a big van, like a big built out van, and I like see it through this like tiny little window, bear, and then it like shot up the tree. It was crazy. Never seen a bear climb a tree like that. It was wild. The kids in the back of the hitch ended up getting a picture of it. And I think it does look like a grizzly to me.
I saw that.
Because it has like a stouter nose. It's too young to have the hump on the back, but it has like rounder ears and a stouter nose. In my opinion, I'm not a bear expert. Please.
It looks hungry.
Yeah. And then they drop us off at this trailhead, and we're like just kind of gathering. We like go to the pit toilet, like gather our stuff. Chaunce like had a trekking pole repair.
Yeah.
And
this woman was like afraid to go onto the trail. She was like, you guys are going out there? And we're like, yeah. And she's like, oh. She's
like, aren't you scared? And we were like, yes. We're like, but we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, I can't even believe it.
She like was scared to touch the trail.
It was like you couldn't have like she felt like a plopped actor. Yeah, like the way
like
she was talking.
Like, yeah, like she was like
aren't
computer generated.
Yes, literally. It was like,
Like you're
Are you
playing
for
a
real?
video game and like you walk into a character that like has to talk to you for you to continue the game.
Yeah, exactly like that.
What was
So
her itinerary? Was she doing the full
she
thing?
walked like we literally in the time that had that conversation with us before walking like maybe 10 feet down the trail. It comes back out like by the time we're ready to like actually start going, and she's like, I'm not going any farther alone. And we're like,
It's literally like one-liners.
okay.
Like she was computer generated.
we're like, okay, have a nice trip. And then we just started walking.
And it was funny because these first we did 3 miles the first night. We were just like, we're going to walk until the sun starts to set. We'll stop and we'll eat, and then we'll go the rest of the way.
So you're not in the national park boundary at that
We
point?
are.
We are. We're
Oh.
in the national park.
So do you have to go do
There's zones.
your permit? Okay.
So like the way they do backcountry permits in Grand Teton is there's big zones, and each zone, like within the zones, they have designated marked campsites,
Yeah.
but they're not like assigned. So it's not like you get Camp 1 in Granite Canyon Lower. We had Granite Canyon Lower whichever site we
We had gone to
wanted
the ranger station
Got
when
it.
we
Yeah.
we weren't making the tram.
How
we
big
had-
are the zones?
They're like they vary a little bit. I would say they're each like they're decently large, and there's several campsites. So they vary, but the Granite Canyon one was
Several
probably like
miles.
3 miles wide.
Okay.
Yeah, several miles.
And because we camped at entered it probably about 2 miles in. I think we camped like 3 miles in. And I remember when I made my routes, I like put it towards the furthest edge, and it was like a 5-mile distance. So
Yeah. But now that we've met this woman that has just reaffirmed fear, it was interesting starting because my head was just on a swivel. Like
Yeah.
I was walking with like a rotation of my head spinning at all times, just checking every surrounding because I was just looking for bears.
and I was just yelling nonsense. I just kept like saying shit.
Yeah,
to be
Lisa's
talking.
like clicking her poles. We're just like really being extra. And by the end of the trail, we were not doing that. But I was getting dizzy the first few miles because I kept looking around and spinning my head. It was actually, I remember I was telling you, I was like, I feel really dizzy.
Yeah, you did say
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
I think it was because I was turning my head so much.
I was like, I don't know. Sometimes, like, you know how when you hike for like a really long day and you stop and then everything's still moving?
Yeah.
I was like, that happens to me sometimes, but I feel like it usually takes like a good
Yeah.
10 miles before that effect.
Yeah.
So I'm like, are you hydrated?
Well, even when we sat for dinner, we were facing each other, and I was like, okay, I'll watch behind you. You watch behind me.
And then another like kind of like funny thing, this lady who's also backpacking walks by. She's like whistling
Yeah.
to like, I'm assuming, make noise for bears.
Yeah.
And so we like wave at her
I was
to
like,
just be
"Hi
like,
there."
hi. She doesn't even
Hear
see
us.
us or hear us. And it's just like so funny when someone is it sounds
Trying to
mean,
look for
but like
bears, but can't
they're
see
trying to be
something right
so
in front of
cautious,
them.
but like we're literally like backpackers with like colorful clothing on. And she like
Waving
had no
and
idea
saying
we were there.
hello. Like I yelled, hi there. And she didn't even see us.
Yeah. But so yeah, it just goes to show you kind of have to have like some situational awareness on top of being cautious. But also we discovered there was going to be a lot of bugs on this hike at
Oh.
this time.
Yeah, I don't know how this happened, but I forgot about bugs. Just like, I guess I spent so much time worrying about bears, I forgot about bugs. Had no bug spray. Thank God Elise had picaridin. But they were out. And like
Mosquitoes?
Mosquitoes and
Mosquitoes
flies.
and flies and horse flies and sweat bees, like everything.
Was it just the lower elevations, or was it the entire
It was
trail?
everywhere. We had a cloud of them following us. Like there was a point on the trail where I turned to Elise and I was like, do you think they are just everywhere, or do you think that they are following us?
Like we brought them up here
like,
with us.
did they follow us up this hill?
Yeah.
Because it was just a swarm of them. I was walking like this for certain times. I have a photo of them on my pack when we stopped for lunch the next day.
Was the picaridin effective?
Yes. But effective isn't perfect when there's that many. This is when we sat down for lunch.
Yeah.
They're
like
just
that.
landing on everything. They won't go away.
Mm-hmm.
And if you sprayed yourself with the picaridin like we did, they didn't land on you.
But they would buzz around your head
But they
still.
would still
It's
swarm.
like the annoying
Yeah.
older
They're
sibling.
looking
Like, I'm
for-
not touching you.
Yeah.
I'm not touching
They're looking for a gap. They're
Yeah.
looking for a hole in your shield.
Right.
And they just don't stop. They were everywhere. I'm covered in bites. Like
So the
literally
full
covered.
length of the trail is this way.
Yes.
Pretty much. Like I would say the only parts that weren't where the flies let up a little bit were like at the very top of the passes, but like Yeah, it wasn't like we would be above tree line, they'd still be doing it.
Yeah. But when I was on the PCT and I went through mosquito hell in Oregon, I looked up the dates for this for our future Triple Crown. That was also like July 15th through 20th. Yeah. So I think this is just the range where snow melts.
You said something like, you were like, I didn't think it was, you said I thought it was too early for mosquitoes. And I was like, no, this is like, it's prime time. It's prime melt season. Like this is when they're the worst, I think.
I just hadn't thought about it. Yeah. But yeah, they were terrible.
But all that considered, I feel like we handled them well. Like it could have been worse.
We had literally said, if this is the worst part of this hike, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, because they're annoying, but I would take that over a lot of other things that could have been annoying.
Yeah. What
like
threw
an aggressive
me,
grizzly bear.
Right.
Yeah.
Or like super, super steep climbs that we had to time with passes and weather and like, you know, there's just so many other things that could have impacted the fun level that having swarms of flies around us while we had bug spray on that weren't as bad as they could have been had we not had bug spray.
They stopped biting once the bug spray was on.
Like that part was bearable.
So, yeah. It just threw me off that there were like horse flies.
Yeah.
I've never seen horse flies in the mountains. I was like, I don't know if that's a Teton thing or what, but same. And but anyway, so that night we had a nice little campsite. I think we kind of mentioned that. And then slept well. Felt like I slept pretty well that night. And then in the morning was the mama and the baby moose. I've never seen a baby moose in person. That was so cute. And we kind of followed it up the trail, which was fun because we could like see their little hoof prints. And we were like kind of, you know, are we going to round a corner and see them? So we were like aware of that.
It made the climb more fun because we had the 7-mile climb, but we were looking on the ground to see, can we still see moose prints? And we could still see them. So we were like, they're still walking ahead of us somewhere. And so we were like looking around us for these moose. It was a nice distraction from looking for bears. And we knew they were cute because we had seen them already. And so the whole way up this climb, we just like see the reoccurring moose print. And so we just get excited to keep looking, and it just passed the time really well.
Yeah. There were a good amount of wildflowers, I feel like, as we started to get higher up as well. And then
stopped for lunch at the top. And
at that lake. Oh, wait, no, we didn't have lunch at the lake.
This is when we saw cuckoo bird.
Oh, yeah.
So at the top, we stopped at the top, and we're sitting down having lunch. I'm eating Fruit Loops, and this guy hikes up from the other direction, and he looks over, and he goes, do any of you guys have ibuprofen? And I was like, I got you. And he comes over, and he's wearing sunglasses, and he goes, do you recognize me, Chaunce? And I was like I have no energy at this point, and I hate that question. That's like for someone who like already struggles with names, and when hikers look so similar to each other in hiking form, I hate this question. So I just go, you're wearing a hat and sunglasses. I was like, you're wearing a hat and sunglasses. No, I don't recognize you.
He takes off his sunglasses, and she's still like, blank stare.
I'm not wearing glasses. Like, no, I don't. Like, just fucking tell me who you are. And he was like, it's Lieutenant Cuckoo Bird. And I was like, oh my God.
And I recognize the name, so I'm like, oh my gosh. I was like, we haven't met, but I know who you are.
But I showed Elise videos from when he was in studio recording, and he looked so different on trail in a good way. He looked like,
careful now.
Well, when he was in studio, he kind of looked like some guy that worked like a desk job doing like computers or something. And on trail, he looked like he was like energized and younger and like just like more like refreshed. I think like he looked 10 years younger to be on trail.
He was like 30 miles into like a 40-mile day. So
yeah,
he did the full thing in a day.
Yeah. And that like was very humbling because I had just struggled up the 7-mile climb just because I am someone who didn't train again. And he's like, yeah, I'm doing it in a day. And I'm like, wow. That's so impressive. And like, wow. So he sat down and he had a lunch with us. I pawned off some food on him because I had overpacked food.
He denied my trail mix.
He took my sandwich and denied Elise's trail mix.
What was his rationale?
It was a ham and cheese sandwich.
Yeah, and he like had lost his bear can, and so he was like, "Do you guys?" I had overpacked food because I was afraid to leave it in my car. So I just like ended up carrying all my food with me for the most part. And so I was like, hell yeah, I want to get rid of food. And then I was like, but my bear can was already put away. And so all I had out was like this peanut butter M&Ms and like mixed nuts combo, which is actually delicious. I would like
Elise
to say.
was offended that he said
And
no.
he was like, I was like, do you want some trail mix? And he was like, of all the things. And made it very clear he
I was
not
like,
into
do
it.
you
I was
want
like,
a
okay.
ham and cheese sandwich on a Hawaiian brioche bun? And he
Ooh.
was like, yeah. And I was like, would you like mayonnaise or mustard? And he said both, so I gave him both. So yeah, I got rid of some weight there. I was really pleased with that. He said something about how he's going to be in the area. He might have
September.
reached out to you about it. Yeah.
He's also going to the King Gizzard.
I know.
Lizard.
Well, I told him that because
Yeah.
he was like, I'm going to be in the area for a concert at Red Rocks in September. And I was like, what concert?
Yeah.
And he was like, King Lizard and the Lizard Wizards. I was like, shut the fuck up. Me, Zach, and Travis from Sawyer are going.
Yeah.
Like, come with us.
Yeah.
So yeah, we saw him. That was fun. It made lunch more fun.
And after that was like one of the cooler, I mean, there was so many good sections of this trail, but basically we had like a teeny tiny little climb left, and then we were up on what is called the Death Canyon Shelf.
Yeah.
Which, looking at the topos, I was like, I feel like this is going to be cool, because it was like, I was like, I think it's literally going to be like a shelf, like a big, huge rock formation to our side, and then like a big drop off to the other side, and we're going to be walking on like the little shelf in between. And that's exactly what it was, and it was really cool. It honestly reminded me of the Chinese Wall in Montana. It was like a similar type of formation, but imagine that. But then like there's also a huge like valley to your right, for anyone who's familiar.
I'd never heard of the Chinese Wall in Montana until you
It's
said
like one of
that.
the big attractions in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, which is like right before Glacier.
Interesting.
I think Stu had mentioned it actually.
Yeah, my brain has just recently started hearing this word, and now that I've heard it once, it keeps
everywhere.
coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was really neat like area, and there was still like snow on the mountains, which made it really pretty.
Flat? It was just
it was a flat, like we were just walking
No
flat
more
along like
elevation.
all the scenery. That was like one of the first times that we like started. We saw some like other backpackers, I feel
Yeah.
like, and technically, should we?
I don't know what you're about to say.
Our permit for that night was on Death Canyon Shelf.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah. Fuck it.
to clarify, don't do what you want, but like technically, from my understanding, we had permits, we didn't like do something wrong.
We didn't do anything wrong.
The fact that we have
Classic
to
story.
So we had a permit for Granite Lower the first night, Death Canyon Shelf the next night, and then technically you leave the park after Meek Pass or Fox Creek Pass. So
And then
basically,
you come back in.
yeah.
And then our third night, we had a
So you
permit.
camped outside of the park.
Yes,
Right.
instead of at our
Yeah.
permitted
campsite.
site.
And
And
technically, if you do that, it breaks your permit.
from my
Yeah.
understanding, I think that like voids technically
Kind
your
of like
permit.
missing a flight.
But yes, but that being said, it made our days a lot better, and so it made more sense for us to, because if we didn't do that, we were going to go over like two passes the next day. No, like 3 passes the next day. It would have been like a 18-mile day with like 5,000 to 6,000 feet of gain versus if we just did a little more that day.
For us, it was nice to have the Death Canyon Shelf on the permit because if we needed to stop, we had that as an option. But if we were feeling good, we had
Going
the
outside the
Alaska
park.
Basin as an option. And Alaska
Yeah.
Basin is outside of the park. And like my rationale is we're not camping in a permitted area that we're not supposed to.
Yeah.
We're not like, we're not taking someone else's campsite that they have a permit for. We're not doing any of that. We're just leaving the park and camping somewhere that we're allowed to camp and then continuing our itinerary.
Yeah.
Which I think honestly is totally fine, but technically it could have invalidated our permits to have not slept where we were supposed to that night.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of LNT, I don't really think it is
Yeah.
anything
Sure.
worth
It's more so for the
reprimanding.
park rangers know like where you are
Yeah.
and stuff, and like so it also just made more sense for our itinerary.
And this is a good caveat. I was talking to Twinkle about this because turns out Rollins was having a CDT event that weekend. So we were like, worst case scenario, we could play a cornhole contest.
Yeah.
Sean
And
suggested section hiking the basin, and
you suggested that, and I said
I joked
yes.
about it.
I was like,
and then
fuck yeah,
Sean
that'd be
took it
so funny.
seriously,
I thought
and
that
I
would've
said
been hilarious.
absolutely not.
It sounds like a not fun thing to do.
Absolutely
no,
not.
but as someone who would like to, throughout time, eventually section hike the CDT,
Yeah.
that would be a great excuse to do a shitty section for a fun reason.
Sure.
So I was like, yeah, by all means, let's do that. That'll be hilarious. We'll have a terrible time, but it'll make for great content. Imagine tuning into the Teton Crest Trail episode of Backpacker Radio and you find out that we section hiked the basin and
Yeah.
that's actually what the episode's about.
Yeah.
That's great. But Twinkle was like, in theory, you could do the trail in 2 days, totally doable. Grace and her friend did it, and it wouldn't affect your permits, because if you can do the trail in 2 days, if you're a strong enough hiker to do 20s,
sleep in the basin and then just
Yeah.
finish
yeah,
the next
you
day.
hike,
It's like a
sleep in the
perfect-
basin where you're outside of the park, and then you finish the trail the next day.
Yeah.
Honestly,
could
it
also
sounds doable if you're just
It
doing
is.
4,500 feet a game.
Yeah,
per day.
it is.
totally doable. And
It's just,
also,
it's such a nice trail that it's just, if you don't have to rush it,
Savor it.
it's nice. Like, we had such an enjoyable, pleasant time because we just moseyed our way through
Yeah.
it. Like, we
Yeah.
didn't feel rushed. We took breaks more frequently than we maybe would have. We took longer breaks. We'd see something we liked and we'd be like, let's stop. And we had plenty of time and more to do the things we wanted to do, which made it really fun.
yeah. And I will, too, like, depending on the terminus you start at on the south end, you could do, like, 3 miles camp, do, like, a big day, get to Alaska Basin, and then hike out, like you said. So you could even still make it, like, a 3-day trip. It's just you're still going to be doing 20s on the crest itself.
Yeah.
'Cause-
Yeah.
But I would say that's a good backup option. If you, like, don't get the permits in January, try for walk-ups, and then worst case, like, you can still do it stopping in Alaska Basin. And it's a beautiful area. Like, it's in the Jedediah Smith Wilderness, and it's just a gorgeous area. It reminded me of the Sierra, honestly, that particular section did. So we went over what was called, I believe, Meek Pass at that point. And we crossed paths with some other hikers, and we asked about,
That's
this is
the
like
pass.
one of the
That's
first
sick.
people that we asked about Paintbrush Divide, which was the part that we knew might have some snow. And they hadn't done it that year, but they were like, this was the first person I feel like that looked at us and they're like, you guys are going to be fine. And like, that ended up being a consistent theme when we asked people about like how Paintbrush Divide was. They would just look at us and they'd be like, oh, you guys will be fine. And we're like, I'm flattered that something about us is giving off like
Experience.
experienced good hiker or whatever. But I was like, them saying that, I was like, okay, it really must not be a big deal, which we'll get to what it was like.
My
But
thought process from the people that were saying this is, I think about before I did any sort of through hiking, when I was just going around to national parks and like was a fun little day hiker and like outdoors were cool. There's times I did hikes where I did things that should have been more scary to me, but I didn't know to be afraid because I'm like, I'm in a national park. It's a hike on the list of cool hikes in the park. Sure, there's a section that's a little scary, but like, I don't know to be afraid of it. I don't have like the right stuff for it. It'll be fine, right? Like, just like that mentality of there's a vision of safety because it's in a national park and it's like a day hike that you could do. Like, just something about it just says this is fine.
well,
I think when I started doing when I reached the PCT, when I reached the Sierra section, I started to actually have a fear of snow. I'd never had one before, but I started to have a fear of snow because I started to see what everyone was saying about the Sierra, and I started to realize, oh my God, this is actually like potentially really dangerous. And this fear grew from having experience enough to know where I should be afraid, versus prior to that, I didn't know how dangerous things could be, so I didn't know to have those levels of fear. And I think we were talking to people like that who maybe didn't know to have more fear of certain circumstances. Or maybe we just have stronger fear.
I think it's that. I think it could be that. I think it also could be something about us was giving off, like, I don't know, maybe it was the ice axes. Like, we were carrying ice axes because they told us to, and like so many people weren't. And like, in fact, there was a day hiker I ran into at one point who like was looking for the trailhead. She had done this like massive loop, and including the Paintbrush Divide, and was like, have you seen any signs for Lay Lake, which was where we were ending? And I was like, well, you're still kind of far, but like, I'll show you. I showed her my maps and I like told her where to turn and stuff. And she was like, oh, thank you so much. That's great. The guy just told me like I would get there, it loops back around eventually. And I'm like, that's terrible advice to just go out without a map. And like, anyway, so she did it. So I was like, okay, it really can't be, not saying that like, I don't know what kind of a hiker she is, honestly, but she was very clearly going into this loop she did that day, very unprepared. So I was like, if she just like winged it and like didn't even say anything, like I'm so traumatized from that thing I just did, then I was like, whatever, it's probably fine. But
we're still
probably
a
getting
ways
ahead of
away
ourselves.
from paintbrush in terms of where we are at trail, but we start hearing about it at this point.
Well, I was asking because I just
Yeah.
I like to know conditions. I'm like, what do we need to?
And I think it was calming because if people were like, "Oh, it's really scary," like that would have made us have some anticipated dread.
And maybe that's why they did it too. Maybe they were trying to like not make us anxious.
Yeah, which we need more of those people.
Yeah.
Join the PCT Facebook groups and give us some nice encouragement.
Yeah. But so we passed those people on Meek Pass, and then we went down these switchbacks called Sheep Steps, which were really cool. It was like just a cool like rock formation area, and then we stopped for dinner. Yep. And we were a little nervous we were gonna get rained out, and this was like it was just like reaffirming of like just let go theme of this hike, because we started to feel raindrops, and we're both like, do we need to move? And then like, do we need to go start hiking again? We were like in the middle of cooking dinner, and I was like, we were both kind of like, well, let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
And then it didn't rain. It was perfect.
It was great.
But I did bust my ass open on a tree.
Oh my god, yeah. Elise scratched up her whole ass on this tree. She has a big bruise. And do you want to show Zach?
Not really.
Okay.
Because I'm wearing high-waisted shorts, but
we have a video of it. Elise was like, show the camera, and like pulls her pants down.
It's just like the top of my butt crack, but
you can see the top of her crack.
So I had a bruise already from packing my bear can poorly on the first day, and so that was already really tender. And then I went to like go pee behind this tree, and didn't realize how close I was to the tree, I guess, when I had squatted down to pee. And so I like stand up like in a normal speed and like just like banged my ass on this tree and like got a big scratches from it.
It looks like claw marks. It looks like someone just like scratched her. So that was funny.
Yeah, and I was like, I showed Chaunce, I was like, look what I did. And she was like, oh my god, it's bruised. And I was like, oh great, so the scratches are on top of the bruise.
Yeah, it's perfectly aligned.
But that was really, then we like hiked, you kind of skirt around Alaska Basin, which was cool, very Sierra-esque, like these like flat like granite rocks with like a lot of trees growing out of them and like lots of water flowing everywhere. We had a stream crossing that was I feel like every time I have a super cold stream crossing, I just forget. Like we took off our shoes because we didn't want to have wet shoes, and it was like 10 feet across, 15 feet across, and my feet were in so much pain because of how cold it was by the end of that. And glacial melt is cold.
Yeah.
How deep is it?
It wasn't that
not
deep. It was like ankle.
No concerning stream crossings
Nothing
on this
concerning.
hike.
Get to Sunset Lake. This is where we saw other people. Again, this lake didn't need permits, so there were several other tents there. It
was gorgeous. Like
really
I got hype when I saw it was called Sunset Lake, and it makes sense. It's like perfectly facing west.
Yeah.
So like you get like the sunset over the like huge like rocks of the Alaska Basin, and a beautiful little spot.
Sunset.
One good trick I found from Gaia. So like in that basin, the restrictions are you have to be 200 feet from lakes and 100 feet from streams. And so something I realized we could do with Gaia, which is nice, is you could like measure, like use your location and then click on like the lake to make sure you're at least 200 feet away.
That's cool.
Because you don't need it to snap, because it's like you want it to be like crowfied distance.
Yeah, we want that.
The one situation where it works. But yeah, that was a nice little spot. Lots of marmots around there as well. And
that was where we started to see the chocolate marmots.
Yeah.
We hadn't seen chocolate marmots before that, but now we saw our first one and we were like, what is that?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're camping at the lake, for instance, are there established campsites? Are there areas where clearly people have camped a lot? Okay.
And I would say use those. Don't like create your own. There's enough.
Yeah.
Or at least that we saw.
That one didn't have the little like markers in the ground that said campsite with an arrow because it wasn't like permitted sites. But throughout the whole national park part, there's little stakes in the ground with like a sign on it that will say campsite with an arrow or group campsite or whatever. So those are all marked. And this one you could see where the flattened spots were and kind of where established spots were already set up. So we would try to choose something that could fit both of our tents that looked already pretty established.
And then from there in the morning we went up Hurricane Pass, which I think was like my favorite part of this hike. It was so cool. You get like up to the top and you get like a perfect view of Grand, Middle, and South Teton. So you're like up on like the high plateau once you climb up there for a while. And it's just like excellent views of that. And you kind of like stay up high and like walk along the crest, and then you go basically down Hurricane Pass after like being up for a while.
And I thought the pass looked really cool, but then when you come down the other side and you think you already saw the nice part, there's this glacier called Schoolroom Glacier.
Schoolroom Glacier.
That the melt from it was forming this pond in a crater.
It's like it looks it's almost like it's so perfect it looks man-made. Yeah. It has like this huge like moraine around it.
You see that little wall around it too?
Yeah. It looks like a dam, but it's, you know, like glacial deposit rock.
Yeah.
And
that's cool.
Just super cool.
It was super cool. And like going down that whole pass, the whole valley was just gorgeous. And like you had like the Tetons like just towering above you, like super close by, which was just cool. I just love being like up in the mountains like that.
Yeah. And at the bottom of that was where we saw that first moose. That was right at the bottom. Elise has, we learned, a moose sense. So, like, we'll get to an area, and Elise will be like, this feels like a place that a moose would be. And then there's a moose.
She starts sniffing around.
Yeah. I'm like, it's kind of
Where is it, girl? Where is it?
Yeah. Get her.
And usually, I mean, for anyone who's curious about, like, moosey, like, if you want to like, keep an eye out. For one, there's, like, a few signs that I noticed I, like, have started to pick up on. One is, like, if you see, like, little water droplets leaving streams that cross the trail, along with like hoof prints, probably a moose just walked through that water. It's like fairly safe to assume it's fresh, and you might like round the corner and see a moose. They love being in like willowy and aspeny areas that are like kind of open, because they eat those bushes. And then like they're like the mornings better because it's like cooler. But we did see this one at like 11 a.m. It was pretty warm already. And then also like in so if it's like misty out, I'm always like my moosey
Little
senses
meadows.
are tingling. Meadows. And like also I mean you can look out for scat obviously, and then what was the last in mating season you can hear their grunts. Like there were a lot of times in Glacier where I would hear a moose grunting before I ever saw one, and I'd be like, where is it? Which is like very obvious sign, but
yeah, so that was a cool little stop. We stopped and looked at the moose for a while. And then pretty soon after that, we saw our second moose. Because in my photos, I don't have any photos in between those two mooses. And this was the second one. Yeah. That was his big rack.
A big bull.
That was after we knew we had the Hurricane Pass that morning. This was the day we had to do 2 passes. And so he's a big bull in velvet. And we knew that there was a cutoff, basically, like where we could go back to the road. Like the whole crest kind of parallels like the front of the Tetons. Like, what am I trying to say? The trail parallels like the road that goes through the park. So there was a fork where we could bail out early, basically, and not do paintbrush divide if we, 1, felt like the weather was going to be bad, or 2, had heard that it was super sketchy. Because everyone had been very positive about our abilities to go over paintbrush divide, and we had kept checking the weather on like the Zoleo, we felt like it was worth just trying. I think that was our hope, was that we would go for it. We knew we had this option.
So it was.
And that's where we started seeing tons of people. It was that junction. They were just everywhere. It was wild. Like we came from like seeing 1 or 2 people a day to like tens of 20, 30, 50 day hikers.
I think what helped was we saw enough people that had done paintbrush that said it was okay, that looked less experienced, that we thought we'll be fine.
And that's, I think, what everyone else thought too.
Yeah.
But going up that trail is where we then saw that other moose.
And then we had lunch at that stream, and we had our little yard sale.
Did Cuckoo have a ice axe with him?
No. He was also like, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, he was wearing snow gaiters.
Yes, he was. Snow gaiters, and I don't think he had spikes either.
No, I didn't see any.
I didn't ask, though.
But
he didn't have an axe. He was
had
like,
a
you're
tiny
fine without an axe. Which he was right, which we'll get into. But, yeah, we had a yard sale lunch comically on the side of this, like, super popular trail next to just, like, a random stream. And because it was, like, a flat spot, we were like, there's water. What we didn't realize,
this is where Far Out would have been a preferred option, because Far Out would have told us that like 3 feet ahead was this gorgeous lake.
We knew 3 feet ahead there. We knew the lake was there, and I was like, it's probably really pretty. However, it looked, when we had the discussion about like where to have lunch, it looked like it was further ahead. And so we were like, oh, do we want to hike another 2 miles up or just have lunch now? And so we just had lunch then.
Like
and then it was so funny because when we got there, it felt a lot shorter.
Yeah.
And it also like we absolutely should have waited to have lunch.
Yeah.
But
was it that your dot wasn't accurate on the
GPS
app?
I think it was just, I didn't even measure like how far it was to the lake. It just looked like it was a mile or two. And we knew it was up. So
at this point, I gave up on my maps.
Yeah.
I just figured we were hungry. Like we wanted to eat then, whatever.
Yeah, we were just like we were unbothered. We were just going with the flow,
and it was fine because we still hung out at the lake.
Yeah,
like
we had time. That was the nice thing about our pacing is we had time. So we get to Solitude Lake and it looks great, and we're like,
let's just hang out. It's like gorgeous.
Yeah.
The sky is blue. We're like
a lot of day hikers.
Yeah, we don't need to worry about
baby
weather.
was there, which was cool. People were kind of ignoring the regrowth signs, which wasn't the coolest. But there were people swimming. There was people with chairs set up, people with towels. There was a tiny baby. And so we put our feet in, and the water was freezing.
Sorry, which lake is this?
Solitude
Lake.
Okay, yeah.
The water was freezing. But my feet had not felt better on the entire hike than after I forced them to sit in that water for like 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. They felt so good after.
I felt like it made my mosquito bites stop itching, which was nice.
Yeah, the water was magic. And the view was really nice. It was the mountains across from it still had some snow on them.
Can you see Paintbrush Divide from this vantage?
Not really.
Okay. It's around the
We
bend.
knew it was like up the valley, and like it was funny because Chaunce was like, we're going up right there, right? And I was like, I think we go around that big like land formation. I was wrong, and we were going just like up the side of this mountain. And so you kind of wind around a little bit further back. You kind of like come up in the valley, and then you like wind up the side to get up to Paintbrush Divide.
Really good views on the uphill.
Mm-hmm.
Damn, look at the wildflowers.
Yeah,
That's
really
lots
good
of good
views.
wildflowers.
That's a good postcard.
Gorgeous like view of the Cascade Valley, I believe is what it's called, because like all the zones were like South Fork, Cascade, and stuff.
And then we started seeing snow, and it was like the first snow wasn't bad.
Yeah,
but you said it was
a
a no fall zone. That one.
I don't remember. I think I was talking about the divide, Paintbrush Divide, when I was talking about no fall zone.
This was before we got to the climb up Paintbrush. This is before the rain. There was that one spot after that uphill.
Oh yeah, where I stopped for you because
Yeah,
so I was
stopped and
kind of
waited.
like, the sky was starting to get a little gray. So I get really anxious when that happens, and I kind of start powering.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to I was not going to ditch Chaunce. And so I was like, I crossed
Elise
this
is 7
one.
inches taller than me. She's a little faster.
I'm training for 50K, so I'm like, I hope
She's
I
more in
can.
shape.
When I crossed this one patch of snow, which was like totally like chill.
Yeah.
But it was, I do remember this now. I did stop for her because it was like if you slipped, you were going to hit rocks. Like it was, you don't want to fall there. I don't know if it was like a full on no fall zone, but it was definitely like a risky.
Yeah, and
if
it
you
wasn't
fell.
too bad.
It was not super steep or
but it was a
anything.
nice like appetizer for the meal because it got you in the mindset of like, okay, so we're doing this.
Yeah, there is snow up here, and then we're going up all these switchbacks, which like were pretty long. And it took a while, and like the sky like across the valley is just like gradually getting grayer and grayer and grayer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well at least it's not that gray right above us. It's like a light gray above us. And then I swear I think I saw a flash of lightning, like just the flash, not like a strike, but. And then we heard thunder, so I'm just like, at this point, I'm like, oh,
it's like starting to rain. It's cold.
And we had literally talked about like, the only thing we don't want to do is have to cross this sketchy snow when we're feeling rushed if there's rain. So that's why we had been like obsessively checking the weather, which this is a great example of one, how fast it can come in, and two, the fact that like, I always am like, if something says 30% chance, I assume it's happening. Like, but we had gotten like, it might have just been rain. It only rains like right above us. But
do you have service? Are you doing this on
Zolio.
I'm looking on Zolio,
Okay.
and it gives 2-hour updates. So it says what it is right now, and then it says what it is in 2 hours, and then 2 hours from that, and then 2 hours from that. And it was all showing just partly cloudy, but chance of rain was like 42%, 38%, 30% for the following 2 hours, 2 hours. So we were like, okay, we should be fine. Because this morning it had said like the little raindrops were on it, and now it's just mostly cloudy, so it's probably moving out.
And I think an important caveat there too is like, the first time we checked it, we were over where it was
Yes.
gross looking.
Yeah.
And so that was accurate. And then we moved away towards
Yes.
Paintbrush Divide where it was less gross. And but it was starting to like I put on my rain jacket. It was raining enough for me to be like, I'm going to put on my rain jacket. So I'm hustling up this pass. I'm turning around, making sure Chaunce is still in sight. These other two people pass us, and I think they were convinced I was going to ditch you.
Yeah.
Because they kept being like, do you see your friend? And I'm like, yeah, like I'm not going
Like,
to.
we're fine.
I'm not going to not, like,
Right.
I'm not going to cross this sketchy shit without her. Like,
Right.
I'm not an asshole.
Right. And like I also know that
Yeah.
Elise wants to get to the other side and that she's going to wait at the snow. Like we had talked
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah.
You know, like I knew she wanted to get up and over because she was worried about rain, and I'm going as fast as I can. This is the only part of the hike that was somewhat unpleasant because I had been used to being able to just like take breaks as needed, no rush, we're just having a good time. And now that the rain is moving in, I'm
We had to
counting
just go.
switchbacks, and
Yeah.
there's 6 switchbacks before I get to the top of the topo map that I'm looking at, and they're really long switchbacks. So I'm like counting them as I go. They slowly get smaller. Like the last 3 were really small ones, but the first 3 were really big. And I'm watching the rain start to get heavier, and the clouds are getting darker, and there's starting to be like little thunders, and I'm just gassed. Like I have not taken a break. I need a sip of water. I just like want to sit for a second. My feet are hurting.
The wind is picking up. It's getting really cold.
Yeah, and it's just one of those situations where you're like, sorry, you can't have a break right now, you know, to yourself. And my body wanted one, and I'm starting to get a little nervous because I'm like, you know, I don't want to go over this sketchy snow part that I have yet to see while it's raining, because then it's going to be soft and like slushy, and that seems sketchy. So I need to get there before the rain hits, but I also don't want to get there so tired that I'm shaky because I haven't taken a break. So it feels like I'm just not winning no matter what. But I can't think about that right now because I just have to get up and over this before things get worse, because going through it while it's pouring rain seems like the worst of any of these options.
Yeah. And luckily, well, of course you get up there and it's one of those passes where you're just kind of like up on an exposed like flat area for a little while. But luckily the snow is, once you've gone down, not a lot at all, but like at least a tiny bit. And there's definitely stuff that's higher nearby. So you get over that like exposed part. And then I like waited for Chaunce while we were just looking at this snow shoot basically, and we had talked to the backcountry ranger we got our permits from, had actually said he dug a trench in it a week
That's
before.
steep. Yeah.
And that trench definitely made a huge difference because you could see the path people were taking before, and it's just the snow itself was so steep that's like definitely what made it scary.
So it's right there,
And-
but you can see it doesn't look as steep as it is.
Yeah.
But you get that little bit of snow right there, and then it's just rock cliff. So
Yeah.
like you don't have anything to self-arrest. Okay, that part you
So-
could kind of see how steep it was
Yeah.
next to me.
Because he dug a trench, it definitely was like very doable. Like it was a 12-inch wide, basically like flat spot in the snow, which was
The
super
path was-
helpful.
yeah, the path
Like,
was
this
great.
Is, if
Uh-huh.
that's me looking at it after I crossed it and I'm
Yeah.
on the trail.
I
So the
wasn't
path-
concerned about where to put my feet. It felt
Yeah.
like it was like someone laid down
a track.
a foot wide flat track.
Yeah.
The scary part was, like Chaunce said, when you look to the snow is so steep at this, and below it is nothing.
Yes.
Like it's just
There's nothing to
abyss.
self-arrest on.
Yeah. So like I thought it was interesting that they had recommended an ice axe, because I'm like, great if you have one, but like there's no way. Like it's the rest of the snow patch is not that long. I just felt like you wouldn't have time to self-arrest before hitting rock.
Right, and the rock is just straight down.
Yeah, so you would just be tumbling, to be
Right.
honest. It's definitely an absolutely no fall zone.
So for us, it was like the ice axe was nice for like mental peace of mind and like a sense of security, but we really had to know that there was no room for us
Yeah.
to
Realistically.
Yeah.
And actually, now that I'm saying that, so what was the scariest part of it was one, looking down and being like,
I didn't
holy
look down.
bananas. But then at the very end, the path itself was like so high off the trail that it was like up like at my head. So it was like
Yeah.
probably almost 6 feet off the actual like trail part once you like rejoined rock. And that part to get back down onto the trail,
It's like a slide.
it's like a slide. Like, and so going up it would have been probably a lot easier, and maybe an ice axe would have been useful for that, to like actually like pick in. and like help pull yourself up, because it was so steep. It was like literally just like climbing like a 6-foot wall of snow.
But coming down it, you have to like slide down on your butt next to this cliff.
And I realized I like was trying to kick in steps, and like I realized I was trying to like make it work before I got onto the slidey part, which meant I was still on the part that had like this really steep drop off to my right. And so I was like, if I sit here and try to finagle this too much, like I could lose my balance, because your pack's on, you're like, you know, I'm like, I felt like my best option was do a controlled slide, because I could see like it would lead straight to the trail, but it's terrifying because right next to the trail it's just like a cliff. Like, so you're like trusting that you're going to slide in the right direction. And that's basically what I did. And I was like yelling back to Chaunce. I was like, that part sucked. I was like, that was scary. And
I was watching her just like scared.
Yeah.
But,
and like realistically, like executing it properly, you're fine. Like, it's not like it was
technical.
Yeah. Like you were going to be okay. It's just
path.
Scary looking.
Yeah.
And so slide down that on my butt. And Chaunce is like, can you like dig in steps for me? So I tried to like ice axe some steps for her, because I think
ultimately I just like, she just held my hand when I got to that part. I was like, just take my hand for balance while I slide down this, so that you can like kind of pull me in the right direction should I not slide in the right direction.
Yeah. And that worked fine. And it was,
but yeah, it was scary. Like for me, it was really scary because there's no room for error, you know, like if there was a longer chute of ice or something where I felt like I could have self-arrested had I needed to, then I would have felt a little more at ease, because I would have felt like there was room for error. But
there was no run out.
Yeah, this was like, you just like, there's just no option to mess up. And that was what made it scary, not the path that was through it, not the length of it, like just simply the fact that you didn't have, like, you just couldn't make any mistakes.
And it was only like 15, you said 30 feet wide, something. It's not like it was a long traverse or anything. So totally doable. Like the people were right. It was doable. It wasn't like.
And that's why people, I think, didn't, like, were saying it's fine, is because the path itself was totally fine. It's just the room for error that was not there. And I think everyone has different tolerances for what is scary versus not scary. So someone could go up to that and be like, yeah, that wasn't scary at all, that was totally fine.
Yeah.
But for me, who's like very cautious and like risk adverse, I just don't like when I don't have room for failure.
Sure.
So, but I'm proud of us that we did it, and we got through it, and it was like in a way not as bad as I thought, and in a way just as scary as I thought.
Yeah.
If you could go back, would you do it with crampons?
We had
no.
I don't think crampons would have done anything for you. We had spikes. It wasn't like
the path was fine. It was just you can't fall. You just can't fall.
You can't like have a moment of vertigo and like go sideways.
So I didn't look down the whole time, because I get vertigo and I get very dizzy and shaky, and I knew I couldn't afford to have that happen. So I had my hat on, and I had the brim tilted so that I couldn't see the cliff. I did not allow myself to look, and I faced my eyes towards the side that was the wall. And we were laughing when I got done with it, because she thought I was counting as I was going across, but every time I was taking a step, I was like, I could do hard things. I could do hard things. I could do hard things. And I was just repeating that with every step to like take my mind off not looking down, because I couldn't get shaky. That's just not an option.
Yeah.
And I still, even when I got to the other side, like I felt the vertigo starting to kick in when I took that video I just showed you. So I didn't even look over the edge.
Well, in the path, the trail after that even is like
a little
steep.
sketch.
Like it's just a little like narrow trail with like steep drop off.
Yeah. So I was just like, I can't even look back and be like, I did that, because it's still a little steep and I just don't want to get shaky. The rain is still cold. Like, we got to get to camp.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so we started descending pretty quickly because it was still like kind of raining and getting cold. And then we stopped for dinner, saw another chocolate, a sploot chocolate marmot. That was the sploot. And then made our way to our last campsite, which was Holly Lake. And it was weird because like there was no one there.
I'm convinced, I had this feeling as we were going to the campsite that this campsite is haunted. And I don't know if this is true or false. Because it was maybe the ambiance of the fact that it was cold rain. It was like evening was there. Like, you know, the sun was starting to get setty, and the campsites are on kind of like the other side of this lake in a sense. You have to walk across these rock steps. So it feels like you're crossing the lake, but then you're getting to this other side where there's like trees and mountain and like whatever that goes into the woods. But it feels like from where the trail is, you're crossing water onto an island almost. That's the vibe that it has when you're taking this rock path. We didn't think that the campsites were there because we were looking at the
path
arrow.
looked like it was flooded and like it was going to go into the
It
lake.
looked like it just went straight into the lake. And so Elise went to check it out and she was like, oh, it turns right. And we followed the lake for a bit and then we took these rock steps across of it, which was really cool. But I just like got there thinking this place is haunted, and it was next to this meadow when you got through the tree clearing. And I was like, that looks like where I would hang out if I was a grizzly bear. And all the campsites had like man-made wind block stuff there, like not man-made like metal or anything, but people had taken logs and piled them like between trees to block wind, and it kind of had like this Blair Witchy essence to it, which was freaky.
I think the weather was contributing to that.
And because there was like a babbling brook near us, it sounded like there were voices. Like we kept thinking we were hearing people when we weren't. This is where that deer walked into camp when I was in my tent, and I got spooked from that. And so I didn't say it out loud because I didn't want to like plant the seed, but in my head I was like, I feel like this place is haunted. No conclusive answer there, just a vibe.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. And something else interesting about that campsite, I've never seen this before, but there was like these little white bags stapled to all the trees, and I was like, what is that? And I went to like read them, and it was pine beetle repellent, which I thought was super interesting. I didn't know that was a thing. But
yeah, I guess they're trying to save some of the trees from
pine beetle, which I mean, and when we were driving away from the park, then I noticed it was really bad like outside of Du Bois, Wyoming, so it's definitely prevalent up there as well.
Yeah.
But Holly Lake was a very nice like area and nice site.
Yeah.
Definitely recommend trying for a permit there. But yeah, we had it all to ourselves, which was wild.
All to ourselves. Yeah, and it was raining, so we didn't really do much there. We just got in our tents.
Put our bear cans away and
yeah.
Not to hit the fast forward on this, I just learned I have a hard out at 2 if we still want to do a
Okay.
Patreon, so we might have to.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's really not
downhill
much,
6 miles to the car
yeah.
the next morning. There's not really much to talk about there anyway.
Yeah.
Drove to
Car
Jackson
turned on.
Hole.
That was good. We decided, to like, we were going to maybe take the tram if we can get a refund, but we got a refund. Had like a great lunch at one of the restaurants at the ski resort.
Went to
and
Lander, spent the night in Lander.
Yeah. I love Lander as like a town
it's
in
cute.
Wyoming. It's just like a cute
Had a
mountain
great-
town.
the mill-
Mountainish
the
town.
mill
It's like right
house.
outside the winds. We stayed at the Mill House, which was like super cool.
The most comfortable bed I've ever slept in.
Went to
Stay
Lander
at the
Bar.
penthouse is what the room we stayed in was
Yeah.
called.
Yeah.
The Mill House, the penthouse. Most comfortable bed I've ever slept in.
Yeah, and it was right across the street from Lander Bar, which is a bar that I went to after doing my 24-hour challenge in the Great Divide Basin, because that's where you pop out is Lander. And
Is that
so
just
it's-
hiking for 24 hours?
yeah, as far as you can go. So
Yeah. And then on the drive back, we saw CDT hikers going through the basin.
In Rollins.
And in Rollins, we saw Katie Jackson
Yeah.
and her little girl crew she was with. We gave them a ride to Walmart. That was cool because like we've seen her at hiker meetups. So I saw her before she left for the CDT, and just the fact that we happened to bump into her on the road was just fun.
yeah.
Featured many times in Trek propaganda.
And we made it back in time for what we were hoping to make it back in time for, which is the Sad Summerfest, aka like emo bands from our 8th grade times that were playing. And we dressed like emo kids and went to this concert, and I got to crowd surf to Check Yes Juliet by We the Kings, which is the second song I've ever crowd surfed to. I was 16 at Bamboozle crowd surfing to it at like the Giants Jet Stadium. And the song came on, and I was prepping Elise. I was like, Elise, because I know sometimes like they will kick you out if you crowd surf, But I was like, Elise, if I see one other person in the air, like I'm grabbing the 2 closest men and telling them to launch me. And I saw one other person in the air and I was like, bye.
And I was like, Chaunce, it's your time. Because at first I was like, I don't know if this crowd's thick enough. But then it worked. And she just like floated through. It was perfect.
It was so funny because I sent Garrett the video and he goes, you've been there for 30 minutes. How
Yeah,
did
we
this
did.
happen so
It was
quickly?
like right when we...
There's me. Wait.
Having
the time of my life.
Yeah.
And then Elise, well, my thing was I want to crowd surf to check yes
Wait, so
Juliet.
is Elise in the back while you're doing that?
She took
I
that
was
video.
just in the crowd.
You
Yeah.
just wanted to get perspective.
Well, because they crowd surf you to the front and then security.
so you went all the way across.
Yeah, look at me.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm flying. I'm having the time of my life.
With the leather pants.
Yeah, I'm an emo kid. I was wearing eyeliner. Do you see my eyeliner now? It's still left over. I was wearing top and bottom eyeliner. It was fantastic. And then everyone was high-fiving me at the end. But Elise's goal, while mine was to crowd surf, Elise wanted to mosh. So every time there was a mosh pit, I was like taking Elise's glasses and just shoving her. I was like, get in there. And she ended up, one of the singers, the lead singer was...
John O'Callahan.
Elise
The
knows
sixth.
all their names. And so he walks into the center of the crowd and Elise is standing there. And I know that this is like what she's hoping for.
She runs full speed into him.
I shoved her.
Chaunce
Shoved her. And then I just like started taking a video of them dancing together.
It was a
So
good
we
time.
both did what we went to do and got hammered off 3 beers, went home and watched a documentary on Nick and Aaron Carter.
Yeah, started it.
Yeah.
You guys were drinking 12% beers? How did you get so drunk on 3?
That was the theme. At Hole in the Wall,
Yeah.
I got drunk on 3.
They were like
At
those super tall
Lander,
boys,
we got
too.
drunk on 3.
You hike enough, that's all you need.
We were just really
but they were like
lightweights.
really tall beers too. It was like those.
It was like this size.
Yeah,
Yeah.
16 ounces, I think.
And now we're here.
Mm-hmm.
We woke up this morning, wiped off the eyeliner, and
Back in the studio.
here we are.
Yeah. Well, an eventful rundown.
Yep.
So scale 1 to 10.
10. We'll do it again.
Great hike.
Great hike.
Yeah.
If you have limited time and you can only take a long weekend, you are getting the bang for your buck on every mile of this trail. Amazing trail.
And you can stop by Yellowstone on your way out
Yeah.
if you have time for that. We didn't
Yeah.
do it, but
Yeah. So I will grab the backpack.
Doing the Kumo question. Yes, of course.
If you would like to grab a ball.
This is the Gossamer Gear Kumo question. Use code SNUGGLEBUG for 20% off Gossamer Gear shelters. I have to change it every time.
if you could have one superpower that's not commonly mentioned, what would it be? Is it me? Do I have to answer it?
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, shoot. I feel like I normally have an answer for this, and it's eluding me. Maybe, like, not commonly mentioned is hard. Does, like, teleportation count as a superpower?
I think you get to be totally off the rails here. You can pick anything.
So yellow
Anything.
blazing?
In a way, yes. But no, I think I would, like, teleport to the trailheads. Like,
But would you teleport if you didn't like a section of trail, like around it?
it's a tough
Like
question.
if you're in the
I think
basin,
it would depend.
Would you teleport past the basin?
It would have been very tempting. I told you the story that, like, in the basin I was so miserable. I said if a car came by, which it's like remote, but there are ranchers out there, I would stick my thumb out and leave. And then a car came by, literally like in the next 10 minutes, and I couldn't do it. So I don't think so. I'm too stubborn, I think, for that. But it would just be convenient to, like, go home, like, have dinner with my parents and teleport back to Summit, teleport down to Denver on occasion, teleport to the base of the ski hill. I don't know. There's just, like, a lot of...
Commuting to work would be a lot easier.
Yeah. I don't have to commute. Well, I guess I do to one of my jobs. So, yeah. I wouldn't be 3 minutes late every day that way.
Yeah, teleporting to trailheads could be really cool. Because you could, like, I could just, like, go...
I hate a
do the
sketchy four-wheel drive
Actually,
road, so...
Your
I could
cars don't
section
break
hike.
down.
I
yeah,
could section
no
hike.
cars. No cars, period. No more cars.
Well, I was going to say I could easily section hike trails because I
Yeah.
could, for example, teleport to the TA. Sneeze coming. Nope. I could teleport to the Terrora and I could do however many miles I could do in that weekend, teleport back, do my work, and
it
then
be
I could
too
teleport to
tempting-
where I left off.
Would it be too tempting to skip over the shitty parts of trail?
That's what
knowing-
I'm asking. Yeah, well, that's what I was asking
Just
her,
like-
but
I think, like, realized I'm too stubborn for that. I think it would depend on like what I went out there to do.
Yeah.
But like I've realized I'm probably too stubborn. Like that was like as close to teleportation as you can get. Like I said in my head, if a car comes by, I'm sticking my thumb out and hitchhiking, and then a car came by and I like wouldn't stick my thumb out.
It'd be cool where like every night instead of setting up camp, you could just teleport back to your bed, sleep, wake up, teleport back to camp, and then start hiking again. I think that'd be cheating in a way.
I think that would. I don't know if that would make if trails would hit the same.
Imagine teleporting to get a cold soda in the middle of like the desert. Though.
That would be sweet. That I would use it for stuff like that for sure.
Yeah.
And that still feels like cheating, but whatever. I would teleport to get a new sleeping pad when my ripped a hole in mine.
Oh yeah, you did that.
Well, sweet. Thanks for the rundown, guys. Action packed. Certainly will be on many people's bucket list now. You did it.
And it's permitted, so get your work together.
Set your reminders.
L&T.
Yeah.
Learn your stuff. Don't pick wildflowers.
To the Trek propaganda portion of today's show. This next one, if you're thinking about backpacking in Australia, meet your next big thru-hiking challenge, the 1,800-mile Australian Triple Crown. This is by J. Taylor Bell, former editorial intern for us, still contributor. I'll just read the first couple of paragraphs here. Styled after the USA's Triple Crown of hiking trails, the Australian Triple Crown is more of an idea than an actual reality. As of now, it mostly just exists on internet forums and consists of completing the three longest backpacking trails on the continent: the Hasten Trail, the Australian Alps walking track, and the Bibbulmun track, together totaling almost 1,800 miles. You guys can get the full rundown on that one, but I feel like we haven't talked too much about Australian backpacking on this podcast. I know we did with Mac from Halfway Anywhere, but I think that's been basically the extent of it.
Yeah, I kind of just think everything in Australia wants to kill you, so I'm afraid to go backpacking there.
Yeah, it's a long ways to go, too.
It's a lot of scary animals.
This next one will be very brief. This is by our very trusty Kelly Floro. New study helps explain why your hiking clothes smell so bad. The major takeaway for this one was that the science supported the fact that, in fact, polyester is the stinkiest of the hiking fabrics. But the study breaks down exactly why that is the case. So if you want to get into the science on that, head to the link in the show notes. Okay, question of the day. I was instructed to not look at the link, so I guess we're going to all learn about this together. And that is...
I don't remember.
Oh, this is a minute and a half long audio clip.
I'm sure it's got text over it.
Oh, geez.
Did you ever spend $1 million in 24 hours outside of like buying a boat, jet, car, gambling, buying a house?
Oh, that was like, how would you spend?
I don't think so.
It was the Travis and
Outside of like real estate.
Travis Kelsey and his brother.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. How would you spend $1 million in 24 hours?
Yeah.
I'll go last.
Okay. I would invest it. That's like the fastest way to spend all of it.
Boring.
I know. Sorry. But that's what I would do. Low cost index fund.
I'd buy a house in Summit County.
Could you get through buying a house in 24 hours though? That's where my caveat is like, damn, could I actually do all of that within 24 hours?
I mean, does it not? I feel
What if
like
the money
they
just-
talked about like real estate in that video, so I feel like
But if
Let's add the restrictions of you can't be lame with this and do this for investment purposes. I think that's
fine,
against the thought practice.
But I'm going to put the caveat that the money disappears after 24 hours if it's not spent. So if you haven't like fully closed the deal on a real estate purchase, the money disappears. So it has to be, you don't know it's coming, it hits your bank account suddenly, and it expires and goes away in 24 hours if not spent.
well, you could argue that like transacting $1 million for an investment, they might not
disappear.
happen that fast either.
Oh, he just told me I can't use that one, so
okay.
no worries. I'll find a different way.
That restriction makes it
Yeah, hard.
difficult. Yeah. Oh, fudge.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think like if I fly somewhere that takes time, so that's eating into my eating into my 24 hours. I don't know. Jenna's a real estate agent. Could you buy something within 24 hours and pay for it?
I sincerely doubt it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's
Even if you're walking in with cash, like
Yeah,
you still
I
have to
don't-
go through the title company.
you could do that for like cars. Like you could. My thought would be buying stuff that you could then cash in at a later date. That won't.
Yeah, but when
go
you buy a
away.
car, you're going to the place that owns the title on that car. Like when you're going to look at a house, you're dealing
Yeah.
with a real
Well,
estate
no, I'm
agent.
saying instead,
Yeah.
like you
Yeah,
could
yeah,
do
yeah.
something like buy a bunch of,
Sure.
like a Ferrari.
Yeah.
I'd probably. Oh, go ahead.
I think I've settled on mine. I would charter a private jet. Just trying to think of ways to get through the money in which I would enjoy it the best. A private jet and go on the most insane food tourism tour possible. So maybe start out east, go from New York to Philadelphia to Boston to wherever the best, most expensive high-end restaurants are, and maximize my time that way.
I could also probably.
don't
I
even
mean, there's
think
gonna be
That
leftovers.
probably doesn't get close to $1 million.
I'd probably start Venmoing everyone I know,
Yeah.
just like because I can't spend it all in that amount of
Yeah.
time, so I might as well just start Venmoing people.
Yeah.
So I'd probably start doing that. There's like a certain amount you could gift a person
I
a
was-
year
I was
without
gonna say,
tax
yeah.
implications.
Or I would like donate a bunch of it because I'm not gonna be able to spend it that
Yeah.
fast. And
I'd
Let's
probably,
go back to the premise of the money disappears after 24 hours, regardless of whether
Oh.
it's to you or to somebody
Oh,
else.
okay.
I see what
You
you're
have to
saying.
spend
Maybe I'd
it
go to
in
like a
24 hours.
jewelry store and I'd buy some really nice jewelry. I'd buy like
Yeah.
diamonds galore. I'd just
Go on a
put
big-
myself in gems.
I like don't let myself buy clothes anymore because I'm just like I should buy other things instead. So like maybe go on like a big like clothes shopping spree and then like maybe go wild at like REI and get all the gear I could ever possibly want, like for outdoor stuff and like buy a bunch of backups and like. But where would I put it all? That's the other thing. I'm like I don't have enough storage space.
Maybe you could buy.
It's boring.
you
I
could
need new
buy a-
skis.
Yeah, how much merchandise is in an REI? More than $1 million, but significantly.
But I have a strip mall by me, like an outlet mall, just
Yeah.
like hit everything.
Sure.
You could find like a really expensive Michelin restaurant nearby and message everyone you know and be like, dinner's on me. Show up at 7 or miss out on what will be the most bougie night of your life.
Yeah, or like throwing like a huge party on a yacht would
Yeah.
be super fun. But like, can I get to a yacht in 24 hours?
I
Like,
don't know. We're landlocked.
I live in
I think you could make that happen. Private jet over to Baja,
yeah,
Caribbean.
have like a crazy 24 hours on a yacht.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Good. We did it. We spent it all. Okay, Triple Crown of PCT. This is part 2 of our series of sections you take someone that you hate. This is the PCT edition.
Yeah.
And I believe it's technically someone you fucking hate.
Yes.
I'll go first.
Okay.
With my first pick, I'm going Hat Creek Rim.
That's a good one.
Hot as fuck. I did it, and I think it was like 103 degrees.
Yeah.
And even I tried to night hike as much as possible, and it was still hot,
Yeah.
even after the sun had gone down.
What's that near? Like-
It's Northern California. You can see
Okay.
like
I'm just
it's
making
right
sure
after
it's not within-
Lassen.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's close to one of mine. I would take someone to do the section between Ashland and Crater Lake in mid-July because that was where I went through Bug Hill. So lots of bugs, and you're walking over all those lava rocks. And for someone who like doesn't have conditioned feet, maybe that might be really unenjoyable. I didn't have a good time
that's
there.
the Three Sisters Wilderness area. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just so buggy. So I'm in my photos. I'm wearing my rain pants and my wind jacket, and it's like 100 degrees out, and my head net because I'm just trying to cover skin. It was very unpleasant.
I'm gonna do Mission Creek. That's like if the year I hiked it, and I've seen posts that I feel like imply it's still this way. If you've never like had to navigate, first of all, it's really hot. It's in the California desert. There's not really water. Mission Creek is a misleading name. It's a dry creek bed. But when they get like flash floods, like in the early spring there, it like washes everything out. So it's like impossible to find the trail. You're kind of just walking up this like super sandy creek bed, and it's like kind of miserable. I honestly like enjoyed a lot of the PCT, so this was hard for me. But
I was going to add that caveat
Yeah.
as well. As the trail's awesome, but
Yeah.
I wasn't even that upset at Mission Creek because it was like a new experience. I was like, this is cool. I've never had to like figure out where the trail was before.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your second one?
Oh yes. I will say, the climb out of Syed Valley.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's like a long steep climb, and it's you start so low that it's so hot. It's Northern California, middle of summer.
A tip for anyone who has this like approaching and is currently hiking, I packed out a cold can of soda that morning to have when I got to the top of that climb, and knowing that I had that ready to go when I got to the top, and actually being at the top sweating and exhausted and like pulling out a cold orange soda was fantastic. Highly recommend. Worth the wait. My second one is the Sierra in May. There's many reasons that I would take someone I hate on this specific section. First and foremost being if it's a heavy snow year, like it's just very hard and scary in general. We all know that. I'm not shedding any new knowledge here. However, the caveat or the key part of this is I'm taking them. So they now have to go through the Sierra with me.
They have to deal with you.
And I am not good to be with in that. I don't think, because I'd be afraid I wouldn't be holding my own weight in terms of I'm not offering much in terms of speed, in terms of river crossings. Like I'm more of a liability than an asset.
Yeah. How long until they just hike away from you?
They're not allowed to. I'm taking them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you're hiking with me through the Sierra in May. Have fun. I'll probably die. And you'll be really annoyed and alone after I die and probably traumatized by it.
Yeah. My next one is going to be this is probably not a popular opinion. Maybe Sobos feel this way more than Nobos, but I thought the southern 8 miles, like the 8 miles after the southern terminus, was not nice. Not nice at all. Once you get, what's the big like recreational lake area, Marina?
Yeah, 20 miles in.
Yeah. There's a certain distance away from that where I just felt like things started to feel, you could tell you're near the border. Things start to feel a little sketchy.
Are you
the
talking
trail's
about
not
the
particularly
south
nice.
end, not the north?
Yeah. Everything.
You like cross train tracks and stuff.
Yeah.
I remember that.
This is unfortunate because that's on my list.
Yeah.
The first 8 miles.
So it was a little strange finishing because, the northern terminus, everything near the northern terminus is spectacular and not true at the southern terminus, in my opinion.
This is going to be, I'm going to not use this as mine because it's pretty much the same, but to piggyback on yours, I had on my list the start of the PCT to Mount Laguna. Because that's a 20-mile day, and I remember when I was researching the trail, one of the big things they were trying to convey...
I think Lake Morena, bless you.
Lake Morena, Lake Morena. That's why I was saying Moreno Valley. I was like, why is that word sticking in my head? But one of the things that they try to convey, at least when I was doing my research for the trail, is camp at Hauser Creek. Yeah. That's 14 miles in. Don't try to make it up over that climb to get to Lake Morena. It's not smart. You're going to be totally tired by the time you get there. That climb is defeating but when you've already done the 14 miles. But there's still people that will do it. Mm-hmm. And so I think this will be a day hike I take the person on, and we'll have the pickup car at Lake Morena, so we'll need to get there. And they're going to be ready to camp by the time we get to Hauser Creek. They're going to see everyone else camping, and then we're going to have to go up that climb.
Josh has a great story about trying to do that climb on the first day. He ended up I think he had heat exhaustion, ended up throwing up a bunch and just laying on the trail to sleep. He woke up to people stepping over him.
Jesus.
Yeah. One of the guys I hiked with had the same thing. He had heat exhaustion at the top of that and was having to eat salt packets and stuff. Mm-hmm.
So listen to the advice. I stopped at Hauser Creek. But...
Yeah, same. Last one.
I have to do two.
Oh, sorry.
You kind of stole mine conceptually, so I'll save it for an honorable mention maybe. But for me, going through, there was probably a 2-mile stretch, probably less, through Glacier Peak Wilderness where the trail was horrifically overgrown with brush. The bushes oversight the trail.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking the entire time, the area is pretty, but I remember thinking the entire time, the trail is very uneven as well, and you can't see where you're stepping. It would suck so bad this short of a distance into a many-month hike to roll an ankle and injure yourself, especially because it's so remote. It would be difficult to get out of.
Yeah.
That particular stretch was not enjoyable for me.
Sure. I put, this one's more like, I'll pick the spot based on when we do it, but somewhere that's about to be closed by a forest fire, so that we need to rush and we have a little bit of panic and we're breathing bad air. Like somewhere, when we were doing the PCT, we were right ahead of the forest fires, like a day or two ahead of these closures. So the sky was like sunset orange at noon. It was raining ash on us. Like it was just generally spooky, kind of scary vibes. And we had no ability to slow down our pace because then the fires were like approaching us. And the air is like not great.
Yeah.
So I would take someone
had this
there.
exact same thing. That sucked.
Yeah. I think my final one is going to be Fuller Ridge and a high snow year, early season. It's just like, I just remember it being so icy. And like miserable because my feet were already like soaked from snow from the night before. We did it like in the morning. Maybe that was our fault. And like a lot of times people, like I made the mistake of not having micro spikes, I think, for that. So it's like really, it's kind of sketchy. Can be very, very dangerous and scary. And it's also not as pretty as like the Sierra and high snow. So it's like less rewarding as well.
Cool.
Quickly go through honorable mentions.
Yeah.
There was a lot of Poodle Dog Bush going through.
Oh, yeah.
Southern California.
I forgot about Poodle
those
Dog
stretches.
Bush.
And Sean's already hit to it, but like wherever the mosquitoes were worst for you, for me, that was in southern Washington. Even though I loved Washington on the whole, just it gets to a point where the mosquitoes absolutely rob your sanity.
Yeah.
For me, that was like a really boggy section of Yosemite. And so it was like you weren't in like the mountainous part. It was like you were just in the backcountry with like a lot of trees and super bad mud and then so many mosquitoes. You couldn't run because your feet would just sink into the mud. So, yeah, that was an honorable mention for me as well.
I put honorable mention was Mount Washington Wilderness to Mount Hood because that was also a lava rock area and a lot of it was burn zones that like had previously burned. So it was just like you're just looking at dead trees.
Yeah.
Mount
I was going to say North.
Why do I not remember Mount Washington?
It's Mount Washington Wilderness, and I only know this because when I was going back through my photos to find that section, I have a photo of the wilderness sign.
Got it.
I would also say like NorCal burn scars, like probably the Dixie Fire area probably sucks now. And then also Mike's Place.
Oh, Mike's Place. Yeah, take them for a night at Mike's Place.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that counts as a section.
No
but
further explanation. Just do that.
Want to take the mailbag?
Sure. Mailbag. Hi, Cinnamon Crew. Longtime listener, first-time caller here. I wanted to write in and thank Chaunce, for her transparency on the show. Chaunce, I know at first it was hard for you to share embarrassing details about your personal life, but your vulnerability about finances actually changed my life. I had never given a second thought to my crappy personal finances until you talked about not knowing how to do taxes and recommended the Money with Katie show last February. I know. Elise loves her. Elise went to college with her. I was bored at work and decided to give it a try since you said it was easy enough for beginners to follow along, and that was the beginning of my personal financial revolution. Since then, my husband and I have read Ramit Sethi's book, he's great, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and made dozens of changes on how we manage our money, all of which are helping us reach new financial goals. I won't bore you with the details, but I think it's safe to say in the long term, your podcast recommendation and the consequences of that will have saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars. On the flip side of that, all Badger ever does is cost me money by recommending tasty shit at Costco or making sweet apparel I have to buy. So thanks a lot, bro. Anyway, thanks for keeping my favorite podcast silly and engaging and secretly making me a smarter and better person. Never stop. Sincerely, Jesse, not a thru hiker, just a professional disc golfer / veterinarian that loves hiking when I have time. Just a professional disc golfer? Like what?
That's amazing.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it's a good Money with Katie. Can't recommend it enough. Great podcast to listen to if you are like me and wanted to feel like I had a better grasp on how the world works in terms of money.
Yeah.
Elise loves Katie. Yeah.
I'll make this quick. We were in the same club in college, and so like I had followed her personal Instagram account for a few years. I don't know if she remembers me or not. But then when she started her money blog, I remember being like, why does she need a separate Instagram account? But I followed it to like be supportive because I was like also.
And you introed me to it.
Well, yeah. And I was in that same place of like, I had retirement accounts, no fucking clue what I was doing with them. That was my COVID hobby, was like realizing that I had no idea what most of these personal finance things meant and like, or how to navigate it. And then that was my COVID hobby. I like learned all that stuff, got really into the FIRE movement, really got into Katie's content, which has like continued to just improve over time.
Yeah.
She like just does her commentary, like the way that she
breaks it down
and the way that she analyzes trends, like she brings new thought to things, I feel like, that aren't being maybe analyzed or discussed, which I feel like is a very valuable aspect to what she does.
And in a way that's like so digestible and easy to understand, which is hard when it's such a foreign topic for someone who doesn't come from a background of financial literacy, and just makes it interesting, which it's hard to take what could be a really dry subject and make it interesting, and she does that. And I think that this is a great segue to call out the Patreon episode we're going to record after this, which is going to be about like monetizing content and kind of going into both me and Elise's journey with that. And like we talked about this a lot on the ride home from the Teton Crest Trail, which is like the back and forth of, it would be great to hike, right? Like to just get paid to hike and just be able to take all these hikes that we want to do all these trips that we want to do, keep putting out content around it to be able to like share that experience with other people. And like how like ways to monetize that, but then also gives and takes for like the sacrifices you would have to make to even make that something realistic, and like why neither of us have like fully done that based on fear and just like
and
not wanting to be reckless. And
yeah,
we'll
and
dive into that in the
cons
Patreon.
And yeah.
Well, thank you, Jesse, for the very nice email, 5-star review. Amazing podcast. This is from Hoff Run 67. Love listening to the trail tales and appreciate the backpacking experience that the guests have had. And this one is from White Pine 77. Check it out. My favorite podcast. This crew does a spectacular job along with their guests taking you into the backcountry. Sometimes raw, but always a lot of humor. If you just love the thought of wilderness and long trails, this podcast is for you. Aww. Thank you to both you guys. If you guys want to hear your reviews read on this podcast, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us any number of stars, just not 1 through 4. And if you did leave us a review, send us a screenshot at podcast@thetrek.co, and we'll hook you up with a Backpacker Radio sticker. Super big thank you to our Chuck Norris Award winners on Patreon. That is Alex and Misty with Navigators Crafting, Andrew, Austin McDaniel, Austin Ford, Brad and Blair from 13 Adventures, Brent Stenberg, Brian Alsop,
Fables,
Christopher Marshburn, Coach for Marion Outdoors, Dane,
Ish,
Derek Cook, Eric Casper,
a friendly ghost,
Eric Hoffman, Julian Daniels, Greg Knight, Greg McDaniel, Haley Buckingham, Liz Seeger.
Wait, no, Palace.
Yeah.
Going too fast.
Patrick Ciancialo, Sawyer Product Spam, Timothy Hahn,
Solo,
and Tracy Trigger. You can follow us at Backpacker Radio on TikTok and Instagram, at BackpackerPod on X, Facebook.com/Backpacker Radio. You can follow Elise
at Elise.Ott on Instagram, Elise Out on YouTube, Elise Out on TikTok.
Follow Chaunce.
I'm Juliana Chauncey on YouTube and Juliana_Chauncey on Instagram. And you can get my book, Hiking from Home, a long distance hiking guide for family and friends, on Amazon. If you've already gotten it and read it and liked it, if you could leave a 5-star, 5-star? Is that a 5-star or just a review?
I think there is stars.
Just leave a review on Amazon. That would be great. It helps other people see it, which is really nice.
Goodreads too.
Yeah, Goodreads. I forget about that one.
Appalachian Trials and Pacific Crest Trials. Chaunce already stole my spiel.
I did.
She's just a hog these days.
I'm taking it all.
Subscribe and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on YouTube. What's up with YouTube? Okay, we got to go back.